Today's reading is of the screenplay Made for Each Other from 1939, written by Jo Swerling. Long shot, New York, Normandy in foreground. Fade in. Superimposed title comes in which reads, Greater New York has a population of 7,434,346, among the least important of whom is Dissolve to Insert Telephone Book, Manhattan Telephone Directory. Hand run down telephone book page and stops at John H. Mason, Attorney, 258 Broadway. Dissolve to Exterior Office Building, New York, morning, long shot shooting down. Pedestrian and vehicle traffic crowd the street in front of the office building. Camera centers on one figure in the crowd, Johnny, who walks slowly along the sidewalk, gazing steadily at something he carries in his hands. Camera moves down and shoots over Johnny's shoulder at what he is gazing at. It is a large photograph of Jane. Camera moves back to a medium shot as Johnny continues on his way, still absorbed in the picture. A vicious bump from a passerby yanks Johnny back from dream realms to the workaday world. Johnny, murmuring an apology, Sorry. The passerby has disappeared into the crowd. Johnny is about to go on, suddenly realizes he is in front of his office building, quickly puts the photograph in his briefcase, and enters the building. Interior arcade. Close moving shot of Johnny. He starts down the arcade towards the elevators. A middle-aged man greets him in passing. Morning, Mr. Mason. Johnny. Good morning. A young lady is next to throw him a greeting. Hello, Johnny. Johnny. Lovely morning. A third greeting comes from a young man about his own age. Hi, Johnny. Beautiful morning. By now he has reached an open elevator which is filling with people. The door of the elevator next to it opens and starts to discharge its passengers. A starter is stationed between the two elevators. A definite reaction from the starter as he sees Johnny. Johnny is about to enter the first elevator, then, seeing that the second one is empty, starts toward it. He finds his way barred by the starter, who warmly grips his hand. Morning, Mr. Mason. Johnny. Harry, it's a marvelous morning. The starter has one hand behind his back. He is violently gesturing a signal to the operator of the second elevator. Starter. Have a good trip? Johnny. Sensational. Starter. Great city, Boston. Johnny. Terrific. Close up, operator of second elevator. He gets the pantomime signal of the starter, bangs the door shut, and his elevator starts upward. Close shot featuring Johnny and starter. The starter is shoving Johnny back to the first elevator. Johnny manages to hand starter a cigar as he enters the elevator. The elevator is now full and the operator waits for the signal to start. The starter looks towards the dial of the second elevator. Close up, dial. The second elevator is approaching the 10th floor and continuing up. Close shot, first elevator. The starter gives the signal. The door closes, the elevator starts up. Dissolve to Interior corridor, 20th floor, close shot at elevator. The door opens and several passengers emerge, including Johnny. Interior outer office, Doolittle suite. All the personnel of the law firm, clerks, stenographers, telephone girl, are lined up watching the door. Close shot, the office boy. He stands against the wall clutching a string which runs upward from his hand. Camera pans to take in the entrance door. We see the knob turn. Close up, flash, the office boy. He yanks the string. Close shot, entrance door. It is opened, and as Johnny enters, a contraption arranged over the door opens, and Johnny is showered with rice and old shoes. There are whoops and shrieks from off-scene. One voice starts singing, Happy Bridegroom, You-Hoo, to tune of Happy Birthday, and others join in. Full shot, Johnny looking on bewilderedly while the office personnel sing. The song ends with laughter and ad-lib chatter as Johnny's office mates surround him, pumping his hand, whacking his back, congratulating or razzing him according to their mood. Close shot, group around Johnny. Ad-lib. A business trip, huh? Where's the little woman, Johnny? Why didn't you bring her along? Is she one of the lodges or one of the Cabots? What's she got that I haven't got? You'd better be careful with your expense account. No extras now. That's what you get for going out of town, you old Bluebeard, you. I'm going to sue you for breach of promise. Today, our Johnny is a man. Stenographer. Johnny, what's she like? Johnny. Now wait a minute. I can't describe her. Nobody could. But it just so happens I've got a picture of her. He opens up his briefcase and produces the photograph previously established. It is snatched out of his hand by one of the clerks, who rushes out of the scene with it. The others rush after him. A chorus of whistles, screams, and other extravagant reactions. Close-up, Johnny. Excited and thrilled at the sensation caused by the mere photograph of his bride, but trying not to show it. Carter comes into shot, carrying a batch of legal papers. He is the type who has had but one love affair in all his life. Himself. Carter says, Well, well, well. Johnny. Hello, Carter. So, you combine pleasure with business. Wait till Judge Doolittle hears about this, my boy. Hears about what? About your getting married on his time and without his consent. Or his daughter's. Well, what's she got to do with it? Well now, my boy, the favorite topic of conversation around these parts has been that you and Miss Doolittle... malarkey. Office talk, Carter. Isn't a word of truth in it. Judge Doolittle may not think so. Is that so? Well, if he doesn't like it, he can lump it. Before he can finish, the rest of the staff come into the scene, following the clerk holding the photograph. Ad-lib, as clerk returns photograph. You never asked me for my picture, Johnny. When's the next train leave for Boston? Aren't I as pretty as that? Johnny, has she got a sister? No wonder we couldn't compete. I want one of them too. I wish the boss would send me out of town. Never knew you had it in you, Johnny. Medium shot, the group. Suddenly there is a melting away of the group around Johnny as the clerks start for their cubicles and the stenos return to their desk and make a great show of being busy. Close up, Johnny. He is suddenly alone, the photograph of his new bride clutched in his hand. Doolittle's voice. Mason. Johnny turns, registers consternation. Oh, good morning, Judge Doolittle. Close shot at door. Judge Doolittle has entered and stands, frowning, in the midst of rice and old shoes. He's a formidable old codger who has terrified many a witness. Doolittle is somewhat deaf and wears an acousticon arrangement to facilitate his hearing. He has a habit of speaking in a very low voice, while all his employees have been trained to raise their voices in talking to him. Throughout the entire scene between Doolittle and Johnny, Doolittle will speak in a low voice and Johnny will speak loudly, almost shouting at times. What's all this mess? Camera pans him up to Johnny. Johnny takes off his hat. Well, it seems everybody around here found out that while I was in Boston... What were you doing in Boston? Why, you sent me, sir. Don't you remember? You sent me up there to get a deposition on the Higgins versus Higgins case. Did you get it? Yes, sir. Well, what's all this? What's all this horseplay about? Well, while I was in Boston, after I got the deposition, I had a few hours to spare, and so just a few hours, and Go on. I got married. You what? I got married. You got married? Yes, sir, I got married. Come into my office. Yes, sir. Camera pans with him as he strides towards his office, followed by Johnny. It somehow resembles a march to the guillotine. Long shot, clerks and stenographers looking after them, heads popping back behind doors. Close shot at door of Doolittle's private office. Doolittle enters with Johnny. Close up, Carter. At door of his office. He stares towards Doolittle's office with a smirk on his face. dry washes his hands, and exits into his office. Interior, Judge Doolittle's private office, medium shot, at Doolittle's desk. On the wall behind the desk are two paintings, one of Judge Doolittle in his magisterial robes, and the other of Chief Justice Hughes of the United States, in his robes. Doolittle is seated at his desk, glaring at Johnny, who stands facing him like a prisoner at the bar. Johnny has the briefcase in one hand and the framed picture of Jane in the other. Judge Doolittle says, "Where's the deposition?" Johnny lays Jane's photograph on the desk as he opens the briefcase and takes the deposition from it, which he hands, folded, to Doolittle. Johnny says, "There you are, sir." As Doolittle opens up the paper to look at it, a letter falls out. Insert the letter. Inside a large hand-drawn heart, which covers the page of notepaper, is written, "To the party of the first part, I love you. Signed, party of the second part." Close shot at desk. As Doolittle picks up the letter, Judge Doolittle says, "What's this?" Johnny, "Oh, that's just sort of a letter." Doolittle hands it back. Johnny stuffs the letter into his pocket with increasing embarrassment. Doolittle adjusts his glasses and starts to read the deposition. He addresses Johnny without looking up. "So you got married?" "Yes, sir." Doolittle looks up and glances significantly at a framed picture on his desk. Insert framed picture. It is a photograph of Doolittle's daughter, and upon it is written, "To father, with love, Eunice." Close shot at desk. Judge Doolittle says, "I imagine this will be a surprise to some people." Johnny, "Yes, sir." Catches himself as he realizes the significance of Doolittle's glance at the picture of his daughter. "No, sir. I mean, well, I don't know. It all happened rather suddenly. You see, we met on Boston Common the night I arrived, and I'd had a bite at Thompson's Spa, and then I took a little stroll around the Commons, and I saw her standing there. She was just standing there. She had a cinder in her eye." Doolittle looks up from reading the deposition. "Where?" "In her eye." "Whose eye?" "Jane, Mrs. Mason, my wife." "Oh. Of course, she wasn't my wife then. She's my wife now, though, and I got the cinder out of her eye, and you married her." "Yes, sir." "Quick work, wasn't it?" "Yes, sir. Oh, Judge, we knew the minute we looked at each other. We knew the minute we looked at each other." "You did?" "Yes, sir." "Last year there were nearly 500,000 divorces in this country. Congratulations, Mason." "Thank you very much, sir." An office boy comes in with papers he puts on Doolittle's desk. He says, "Mr. Hutch would like your opinion on this, sir." He starts out, and as he passes Johnny, hands him a letter. "Oh, this is for you, Mr. Mason. Special messenger. It's marked Rush. Important." He exits. Johnny takes the letter, glances at the envelope, registers delight. Then, aware of Doolittle's eyes fixed on him, he hastily puts the letter in his pocket. Judge Doolittle, glancing up from the papers office boy brought in, says, "Rush? Important? What is it?" Johnny says, "Oh, it's nothing." "What is it?" "Oh, it's a letter from my wife." "Your wife? What did you do, leave her in Boston?" "Oh, no, she's right here, sir." "Here, in town?" "Yes, sir." "If your wife's in town, why did she write you a letter?" "Well, she likes to write letters, Judge. Yes, it's sort of a little custom we have. She wrote me a letter the first day she met me, right as soon as she got home. She's written to me every day since. Even coming down on the train together, she wrote me. You see, when I get a letter from her, it's sort of like a sort of visit, you see?" "Mm-hmm." "Judge, when two people get married, they usually go on a honeymoon." "I didn't. I don't approve of honeymoons. Waste of time." "Uh-huh. Well, you know how women are, and Mrs. Mason and I—" "What about Higgins against Higgins? You're the only one in the office who knows this case, and it's on the calendar for next week." if I could get a continuance, opposing counsel wouldn't consent. But I talked to Mr. Hornblow this morning and he agreed to a continuance. Well, all right, take a week. A week? Well, Judge, I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to make it in a week. What? We couldn't make it in a week. Make what? My wife and I had sort of planned a trip to Europe on the Normandy. Oh, well, take 2 weeks then. Fade out. Fade in. Close-up, box of flowers. An envelope is lying on top of a bouquet of dahlias in a large box. A hand comes in, takes the envelope, and removes the note inside. Camera moves up to close-up of note. It is written on the stationery of the law firm of Doolittle, Messerschmitt, Doolittle, and Hutch. The note reads, Dear Mother, had to rush from the train to the office. Will be home for tea this afternoon. Love, Johnny. Camera pans down to P.S. Bringing with me a lovely girl I met in Boston. Dissolve to interior living room, Mason apartment, close shot, at tea table. Camera is on Mrs. Mason, Johnny's mother. Johnny's voice. And after I got the cinder out of Jane's eye, we talked for a little while, and then we took a little walk around the commons. Mrs. Mason. Yes? Camera moves back to take in Johnny and Jane. Jane is sipping her tea with exaggerated casualness. Johnny says, And we walked for quite some time, and then we went over to Thompson's Spa for a bite. Mrs. Mason. Yes? And we had a bite. Well, rather an unconventional meeting, wasn't it? There seems nothing else to say. Jane says, brightly, These cookies are delicious. Mrs. Mason. They're made with sour cream. Johnny blurts out suddenly, I'm crazy about Jane. Mrs. Mason starts so violently she spills some tea. Mrs. Mason says to Jane, John's so young and impulsive. Johnny. Oh, now, Mother, wait a minute. This is different. Mrs. Mason to Jane. Are you visiting relatives here in New York, my dear? Johnny. Well, yes and no. Not exactly. Jane. I came over with Johnny. Mrs. Mason, horrified. From Boston? Together? Last night? Johnny. Why, yes, Mother. We thought that as long as we're engaged. Engaged? Jane. Oh, I know how upset you must be, Mrs. Mason. You know so little about me, and it all happened so suddenly. Well, I should think it was sudden. What did your family have to say about it? I have no family. Oh. There's implied criticism in the syllable. Didn't John say something about your taking a course in journalism? Yes, but I gave it up after I met Johnny. Johnny says, Yes, I'm sort of a postgraduate course. Mrs. Mason, her face brightens. Oh, my dear, if you have a talent for writing... She becomes motherly suddenly. Take my advice and develop it while you're young. One needs all one's time and energy for a career. Jane says, Don't you think marriage is a career in itself? Mrs. Mason. Oh, indeed, emphatically. That's why you mustn't rush into it pell-mell. Marriage is a business, a very serious business, a partnership in the strictest sense of the word. One must prepare for it. There are so many things to learn. Jane looks at Johnny. Johnny says, Well, Jane will learn all of those after we're married. Mrs. Mason. I hope and pray that that day will not come for many years. Johnny. Well, Mother, what do you mean? Do you mean we shouldn't... Mrs. Mason. Emphatically not. There's no reason for Jane to develop into a little household drudge. Oh, I hope you understand I have nothing against Jane. In fact, I like her. I like her very much. Johnny. Well, I'm glad you do, Mother, because you remember a little while ago you asked Jane whether she'd come to New York to visit relatives? Jane waits breathlessly. Johnny continues. Well, as a matter of fact, she has come to New York to visit relatives. She's visiting some right now, you see. He can't finish, looks desperately at Jane. She says, We're married. Mrs. Mason stares at them uncomprehensively for an instant. Her mouth opens and her hands go convulsively to her chest. Mrs. Mason. Oh! Johnny, pitifully. Now, Mother, everybody gets married sooner or later. Jane, a cry of panic. Johnny, get the smelling salts. She rushes over and starts to chafe Mrs. Mason's wrists. Mrs. Mason is gasping for breath like a fish out of water. Johnny hovers over her, agonized and scared. What do they look like? Mother, where are the smelling salts? Mrs. Mason gestures weakly in the direction of the bathroom. Johnny rushes out. Jane vigorously chafes Mrs. Mason's wrists. Dissolve 2. Interior Mason living room, close shot at divan. Mrs. Mason is stretched out on the divan. She looks as if she has just been brought home from the hospital. She speaks in a weary, martyred voice. Oh, what's done is done. You'll have children of your own, I suppose. Camera draws back to take in Johnny and Jane sitting in chairs which face the divan. They are haggard and disheveled. Mrs. Mason says, And you'll love them and devote your life to them, and then they'll grow up and leave you, and you'll say to yourself, It's all right, that's the way it is, you've served your purpose. Johnny says, Oh, Mother, don't excite yourself any more. Oh, I'm all right now. She starts to get up. Johnny and Jane help her to her feet. She takes Jane's hand. I wish you every possible happiness and joy. I think perhaps I'd better go to bed. I'm all right, I'm all right. She starts to exit, then turns with a sudden gray thought. I'll find a place to live, of course. Johnny. Some place to live? Well, of course not, Mother. You'll stay with us. Mrs. Mason shakes her head. We're going to find a new apartment. Again, Mrs. Mason shakes her head. We've talked this over, and Jane'll insist. Won't you, darling? Jane, not too convincingly. Why, we couldn't think of anything else. Mrs. Mason shakes her head desolately. Well, we'll see. Full shot, living room. Mrs. Mason totters, turns abruptly, and exits to her bedroom. Johnny and Jane look after her. 2 shot of Johnny and Jane. Looking off after Mrs. Mason. Johnny. Well, you see, I told you it would be all right. Jane, as she goes into his arms. Oh, Johnny, maybe we shouldn't have gotten married. Maybe we shouldn't have gotten married at all. Fade out. Fade in, the Normandy. Stock shot. Day. Atmosphere of just before sailing. Through the fade, the sound of a steamer whistle. Dissolve 2. Exterior boat deck, medium shot. A steward passes through the crowd and comes down the gangplank calling, All visitors ashore, please. All visitors ashore, please. Exterior boat deck, Normandy. Near gangplank, close shot, Johnny, Jane, and Mrs. Mason. In the midst of a similar group bidding farewell to friends and relatives. All through the scene there is a constant movement of people in the background. Mrs. Mason tightly clutches a paper-wrapped bag. A hoarse blast from the steamer and Mrs. Mason goes rigid. Mrs. Mason says to Jane, Don't let him eat too many strawberries. Jane, I won't. Mrs. Mason, he gets rashes. And don't forget to make him wear his raincoat in London. Jane, I won't. Mrs. Mason, he had pneumonia once. Johnny, oh, Mother, that was 12 years ago. I feel fine now. Mrs. Mason to Jane, and take care of yourself, too. Mrs. Mason and Jane exchange an embarrassed embrace and kiss on the cheek. Jane, goodbye, Mrs. Mason. Mrs. Mason, choking up, take good care of him. She looks at Johnny an instant, as if to fix his image in her mind, then throws her arms around him. Her embrace is much different than the one she gave Jane. She holds on to her son as if she never expected to see him again. Johnny is touched and embarrassed. Goodbye, Mother. Aw, now, Mother, it's only 2 weeks, you know. I know. Goodbye. She finally lets him go. Johnny. Goodbye. She gives them what she thinks is a smile, but it's really a tense twisting of her lips. She starts to go, then she remembers something. Oh! She hands the box she is carrying to Johnny. Johnny, what's this? The heating pad. You forgot to pack it. She makes a feeble effort to wave to them and exits. Johnny looks after her, perplexed and wistful. Exterior, dock, close moving shot, Mrs. Mason. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she moves past people waving farewell to those on the boat. She turns once as if she means to wave too, then turns and plods doggedly ahead. Interior corridor, medium shot. Johnny and Jane come into the corridor, glancing at doors. Johnny has the heating pad under his arm. They find their stateroom and go up to the door numbered 504. Johnny says, "Here it is." Interior stateroom, full shot. Johnny and Jane enter and look around. It's the smallest first-class cabin on the boat with a single bed in it. The only other furniture is a tiny desk and a couple of chairs. Two-shot, Johnny and Jane. Jane tries to conceal her disappointment at the cell-like size of the room, but Johnny gets it. Johnny says, "Ah, what do you think of it?" Jane, with obvious hypocrisy, "Well, it's cozy." Johnny, "It's the only one they had left. I think we can do better after the boat sails." "Oh, what for? I love it. It's so intimate." Jane spies a package on the luggage deposited by the desk. "What's this?" Insert package. It's heavily wrapped in tissue paper. Jane picks it up. Close shot, Jane and Johnny. Johnny says, embarrassed, "Oh, that's nothing." He grabs it and keeps it out of her reach. Jane, eagerly, "Is it something somebody gave you?" "Oh, I know it's for me. Let me see it." "Oh, no, it isn't." "It is too. Let me see it." "But it's just something I forgot to pack." "Well, what are you being so mysterious about? Let me see it." "It's nothing." She takes the package and Johnny looks away, then watches her out of the corner of his eye, embarrassed. Jane says, "I bet it's a going-away present." Close up, package. Jane's hands tearing off the wrapping. "Oh, Johnny, you shouldn't have done this." Her hand rips off the last piece of tissue, revealing a picture of herself. Close two-shot of Jane and Johnny. Jane looks at the picture, looks at Johnny, looks back at the picture, enormously pleased. "Oh, Johnny, you fool," throwing her arms around his neck and kissing him. Close up, Johnny over Jane's shoulder. Johnny, in a weak attempt to laugh it off, says, "Well, gee whiz, I couldn't leave it in the office." He looks away, reacts to something off-scene. Johnny says, "Jane." Jane, her head still on his shoulder, says, "What?" "You know, when I was in school, I was taught that two things can't occupy the same place at the same time." Jane says, "What?" She draws back, looks questioningly at Johnny, follows his gaze. "Oh." Close up, tiny bed, from Jane and Johnny's angle. Back to Jane and Johnny. They cross over to the bed, stare at it. "Well, we'll get the steward to get us a bigger bed." "You couldn't get a bigger bed in here, though." "Oh, I think it's big enough." She stretches out on one side of the bed and looks up at Johnny. Johnny says, "Wait till you try to turn around. Is it all right?" "Sure it is." Johnny lies on the other side of the bed, puts his arm around Jane, and they sink back on the pillow. Johnny says, "Let's see. That's not so bad. Why, there's oceans of room here." A look of blissful content steals over them. Close-up of Johnny and Jane on the bed. They are luxuriantly stretched out. Jane says dreamily, "Johnny, this is the first time in my life I've ever been away from America." Johnny, almost purring, "Me too." "Isn't it just beautiful?" Yeah, I guess so." "Jane." "What, Johnny?" "Do you remember that cinder I took out of your eye in Boston?" "I'll never forget it." Do you know that I threw it away? I shouldn't have done that. I should have kept that cinder, put it in a locket or something. If it hadn't been for that cinder, maybe we'd never have met. Don't say that, Johnny. We had to meet. Yeah, I guess you're right. But still, if it hadn't been for that cinder. Oh, Johnny, isn't it just beautiful? A hoarse blast from the steamer whistle. She edges a bit closer to him, and they turn to look at each other. Jane. Bon voyage, darling. Johnny. Bon voyage. They kiss. Carter's voice. Where's stateroom 504? Steward. First room to your left, sir. There's a knock on the door. Johnny and Jane exchange a startled glance. Johnny says, Come in. Medium shot. Johnny and Jane get off the bed. The door opens and Carter enters. We get a feeling he has come on a mission which he finds exceedingly pleasant. Johnny says, Well, hello, Carter. Nice of you to come down. Judge Doolittle sent me. He did? Jane comes into the scene. Johnny introduces her to Carter. Carter, this is Mrs. This is my wife. Darling, this is Mr. Carter from the office. How do you do? Happy to know you. It's a good thing I got here in time. You've got just 10 minutes. 10 minutes for what? To get off the boat. Jane reacts to this. Johnny turns to her. To get off the... What are you talking about? Higgins against Higgins. What about Higgins against Higgins? Higgins against Higgins goes on the calendar for next week. Oh, no, that's where you're mistaken. I got a continuance for a whole month. You think you did. I did. Why didn't you ask Hornblow about it? He gave me his word of honor. Well, you know Hornblow. Jane says frantically, Johnny, they can't do this to you. Johnny, no, they can't do this to me. What does Doolittle think he is? A puppet? What does he think I am? A puppet or something? Some kind of pawn he can push around any way he likes? Yes, push all over the place? Carter says to Johnny, Is that what you want me to tell Doolittle? Jane shouts, Yes. Flustered, Johnny addresses Carter apologetically. Oh, Carter, wait a minute. Are you sure that Higgins case is going on next week? Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Will you excuse us a minute? Jane. Carter saunters out into the corridor, leaving the door open. Johnny steers Jane to the other side of the room. Jane says, I'm glad you said that, Johnny. Close two-shot, Jane and Johnny. Johnny. Yeah, Jane, look. This Higgins versus Higgins is a pretty important case. Jane says, I don't care if it's the most important case in the world. It isn't as important as our honeymoon, is it? Johnny. Oh no, of course not, darling. Jane starts to wipe his mouth with her handkerchief. But what's the matter? You've got lipstick all over your mouth. A lawyer is sort of like a doctor or a soldier. You got to disregard your own convenience. Convenience? You don't call this a convenience. During this scene, Carter can be seen pacing back and forth in the corridor. Johnny says, No, darling. Now, listen, darling. Believe me, I'd tell Doolittle to jump in the lake, even at the risk of losing my job, but if I win this case, I have a chance to get into the firm. And a firm like this... He stops suddenly as he notes the expression on her face and his jaw hardens. He continues, But it's my honeymoon, and Doolittle knows it's my honeymoon. Camera pans with him as he starts pacing back and forth. In the background, Carter paces in the corridor, passing the open door. Johnny looks up at the moment that Carter passes, giving him a significant look. Johnny says, There are just some things a man just can't do. There are some things a man just can't do. Dissolve too? Long shot. Normandy leaving. Crowd on dock waving farewells. Among them, Jane and Johnny. Two-shot reverse angle. Johnny and Jane are both glum. Jane's eyes are wet as they look out toward the Normandy sailing away. Jane says, That Carter thought it was funny. He laughed. Oh, I hate that liver pill. Johnny says, if they ever try pulling anything like this again, And I hate that Judge Do-Nothing. I wish someone would step on that ear thing of his. Well, we still have the tickets here. And I hope Higgins beats Higgins. Oh, Johnny. He puts his arm around her and they stare bleakly out to sea. Long shot, the Normandy sailing away. Fade out. Fade in. Exterior, Johnny's apartment. Insert apartment bell. Under it, nameplate containing a card with the name Mr. and Mrs. John H. Mason. And under it, the half of another card with name Mrs. Harriet Mason. A woman's gloved hand comes into shot and presses button. Interior hallway, Johnny's apartment, medium shot. Annie, the cook, carrying a mixing spoon and flushed and grumpy from her labors in the kitchen, goes to the door and admits Mrs. Mason. Annie wears a black uniform covered by a large kitchen apron. Mrs. Mason, holding forth a paper bag, says, "The alligator pears, Annie." Annie grunts, snatches the paper package. Mrs. Mason has turned to take off her coat. She turns now to hand it to Annie, but finds she is gone. Jane's voice, calling from bedroom, "Johnny." Annie, as she passes bedroom, says, "It's your mother-in-law." Jane's voice, "Oh, hello, dear." Interior hall, close shot, as Mrs. Mason removes her hat. Jane's voice, "Oh, would you mind fixing the place cards for me? I'm so late. They're right there on the desk." Mrs. Mason, "Certainly, dear." She starts into dining room. Interior dining room. Jane's voice is continuing off scene as Mrs. Mason enters, gives the table a critical once-over. It is set for 6. Jane's voice, "That girl took so long to fix my hair, I didn't get out of the place till 6:30. It's still sopping wet." Mrs. Mason has picked up the place cards from the desk and crosses to table, sorting them. Mrs. Mason starts to fix place cards. "You should have made an earlier appointment." Interior, Jane's bedroom, close shot at dresser. Jane, fixing up before mirror, reacts to this implied criticism. "Yes, I should." She rouges savagely. "I thought I'd put Judge Doolittle on my right, of course." Interior, dining room, medium shot. Mrs. Mason is placing the cards. Mrs. Mason says, "Naturally." Interior bedroom, close shot, Jane. "And Mr. Carter, I suppose I'll have to have him on my left." Interior dining room, close shot, Mrs. Mason. Mrs. Mason says, "You seem to think I've never done this before." Interior bedroom, Jane. No, dear, it's just that I never have." Interior dining room, medium shot. Annie enters from kitchen and goes to sideboard. She opens a drawer to look for nutcracker. Mrs. Mason, "You have the wine glasses on the wrong side, Annie." Annie, resentfully, "The left side was the right side where I worked before." Mrs. Mason shakes her head. "The right side was the water glasses, Annie." Annie exits to kitchen in a huff, giving the swinging door a push that causes it to swing violently. Mrs. Mason takes the floral centerpiece off the table and brings it over to the sideboard. Jane enters from bedroom, her hair in a net and wearing a house robe. She says, "How do you think the table looks?" Mrs. Mason says, "Isn't it a little crowded?" Jane sees that the centerpiece has been removed. "Oh, that girl will drive me crazy." She goes to the sideboard, takes the centerpiece, and replaces it on the table. "The things that pop up at the last minute. I had to borrow some finger bowls from the woman downstairs because we only had 4. She scans the place cards. "Oh, are you at Johnny's right?" Mrs. Mason responds, "I always have been." "I thought tonight I'd put Miss Doolittle there." "Oh, well, of course, it's your party, my dear." Jane rearranges the place cards. Just this once, do you mind? Certainly not. You know, I thought at one time that John and Eunice Doolittle... Jane turns sharply. Yes? Mrs. Mason says, but there was nothing in it. But a lovely girl. Jane, abruptly. Would you be a dear and see if Annie has the appetizers fixed? Of course, dear. She exits to kitchen. Close up, Jane. She picks up Eunice's place card and looks at it thoughtfully. Interior, kitchen. Annie is busy at the stove. She isn't accustomed to dinner for 6 and is in a violent temper. Mrs. Mason says, I think you have too many on the plate, Annie. And shouldn't they be garnished? Where's the silver tray, the one I gave them? Annie, I don't know how many hands they expect you to have in this place. There's just so much a body can do. I'm only human. Annie places tray before Mrs. Mason, who says, I'll fix the canapes for you, Annie, since you seem to have so much to do. As she tastes the salad dressing, she says, A little too much vinegar in your salad dressing, Annie, I'm afraid. Annie, I'm only human. Mrs. Mason, looking towards the stove, Oh, your potatoes aren't going to burn, are they? I'm afraid you put them on too early. Annie slams down the mixing spoon and starts savagely out of the kitchen. Interior, bedroom, close shot, at dresser. Jane is continuing with her dressing. The grim face of Annie suddenly appears in the mirror. Annie says, I'm leavin'. Jane turns horrified. You're what? Right now. You can stand just so much. I'm only human. But you can't do that. What's the matter? I can't please everybody. Jane, understanding the reference to her mother-in-law, and depressed, then frantic, says, Oh, but Annie, my guests will be here any minute. Interior kitchen, Mrs. Mason at stove. She takes the top off the soup kettle, tastes it, adds a little salt, looks at the potatoes, adds a large hunk of butter, opens oven, looks at roast, turns down gas jet. In short, she completely edits Annie's dinner. Interior, bedroom, 2-shot, Jane and Annie. Annie says, Well, I'll see you through dinner, but I'm leaving at 9 o'clock sharp to catch the 9:30 ferry boat to Staten Island. And nobody's gonna stop me. She exits. Interior, dining room, medium shot. Annie enters from the bedroom, muttering under her breath, I'm only human. Mrs. Mason leaves kitchen as Annie enters it. Mrs. Mason says, Watch the potatoes, Annie. Annie hits the door a smack, and it swings violently behind her as she enters kitchen. Jane enters from living room and proceeds towards Mrs. Mason. 2-shot, Jane and Mrs. Mason. Jane says, Dear, Annie has so much to do, the extra guests and everything. Don't you think we'd better humor her tonight? Sort of leave her alone? Mrs. Mason, You asked me to see about the canapes. I know, but it's a great deal for one person to do, and too many of us telling her what to do only upsets her. Well, I was only trying to help. A whistle from the living room interrupts them. There's Johnny. Interior living room, close shot, Johnny. He steps up to greet his wife and mother, holding something concealed under his coat. Jane says, I bet you forgot the wine. Triumphantly, he produces the bottle from under his coat and hands it to Jane. Old Granite Puss's favorite brand. Kisses Jane on the lips and takes off his overcoat. I called up Doolittle's club and found out. Pretty nice, huh? Throws overcoat on hall bench and kisses his mother on forehead, reaches over and takes bottle from Jane, looks at it. It's burgundy and it sparkles. Hands it to his mother. Tell Annie to chill it, Mother. They'll be here any minute. To Jane, You'd better get dressed. Starts to take off the coat and vest as he crosses to the bedroom door, followed by Jane. Interior bedroom, medium shot. Johnny rushes in, flings his coat on the bed, and is ripping at his tie as he starts into the bathroom. He says, How's everything going? Jane says, Everything's lovely. An ultimatum from Annie, and this one's final. She goes to the bed to pick up Johnny's coat. His pants come flying out and drape themselves over her. the sound of running water. Jane, she's through tonight. Close shot at bathroom door. Johnny pops his head out, quickly, without even looking at himself, giving himself about a 7-stroke electric shave. Johnny, tonight? Interior, bedroom, medium shot. Jane says, it's all right, she'll see us through dinner. Johnny, from the bathroom, I don't see why you have so much trouble with servants. Down at the office, we get all the help we want. Jane closes her eyes and grits her teeth. I'd like to change places with you for just one day. The noise of the electric razor stops. Jane is taking Johnny's suit to closet. She hangs it up and comes out with a different suit. Johnny's voice, Jane, for Pete's sake, what did you do with the witch hazel? I didn't have it. Look on the 3rd shelf, back of the eyewash. Always putting things behind things. That was a brilliant idea of yours, asking Eunice Doolittle at the last minute. Jane gets her dress from the closet. Johnny says, she and the judge are like corned beef and cabbage. They're always together. He comes out in his underwear. Jane takes off her robe. And that impossible twerp Carter. I suppose you had to ask him, too. Johnny gets a shirt from the dresser and starts putting it on. Eunice had some sort of date with Carter. What could I do? Mumbles to himself. I not only do all that guy's work for him, but feed him as well. Reaches for his pants and starts getting into them, one leg first. It's all going to be different when my name goes up on that door. Jane, getting into her dress, comes over to him. Johnny has one leg in his pants. She says, oh, Johnny, do you really think so? It's practically up there now. What's for dinner tonight? Roast beef. Roast beef? Doolittle's delight. You know, I tried to have Annie make Yorkshire pudding, but she never heard of it. Oh, that's all right. Between roast beef and Higgins against Higgins, how can we lose? Yes, sir. That's going to be all right. My name up there on the door. He starts to button his shirt. Jane assists him. Johnny, as he buttons the top button. Doolittle. Jane buttons the 2nd button. Messerschmitt. Johnny buttons the 3rd button. Doolittle. Jane buttons the 4th button. Hutch. Johnny buttons the last button. And Mason. Oh, Johnny. Well, didn't I win my motion for a new trial in Higgins against Higgins? I had a memo from Doolittle today. Oh, you did? What did he say? He said he couldn't have handled it better himself. And when he eats from your table tonight, he'll eat out of my hand. And will I tell Carter? And will we hop the Normandy? And will we go places? And will we do things? Darling, I don't like that tie. Wear the blue one. Holy mackerel. Johnny, does your name have to be last? Well, for the time being anyway. You know what it means to a man to get into a firm like that? Jane, as she's squirming with her dress. You know what it means to a firm to get a man like you in it? Turns her back to him. Here, hook me up. He comes behind her to hook her. Johnny says, pretty nice neck you've got there. Kisses her on the back of the neck. Jane says, as nice as Eunice Doolittle's? Johnny says, what do I know about Eunice Doolittle's neck? I never even noticed she had one. Quickly changes the subject, which is a slightly dangerous one, looks at his wristwatch, and says, hey, do you know what time it is? Get dressed, will you? I am dressed. Johnny gets into his coat. Come on, then. Starts out the door. Old Granite Puss will be here any minute. Doolittle's voice. Good evening. Johnny reacts, turns, and starts toward his guests. Close shot, group in the living room. Judge Doolittle standing in a group including Mrs. Mason, Carter, and Eunice, the judge's daughter. Johnny and Jane come into the scene. Johnny, fearfully, says, Good evening, Judge. I've got great news for you tonight, Judge. We're having roast beef. Roast beef for dinner. Yeah. Interior dining room, close shot, Annie. Her face grim, a large serving platter in her arms. Camera draws back and we see she is serving Doolittle, squeezing up against him so that he's in a very awkward position. An appalling silence hangs over the table. From the condition of the various plates, we can see it is Annie's second time around. Doolittle manages to spare a slice. He puts it on his plate and is about to reach for another when he finds that Annie has moved on to Jane. A little bewildered, Doolittle places the serving fork and spoon on the edge of the platter. He has to reach across Jane to do this. Close-up, Eunice. With one prong of her fork, she spears the very end of a stalk of asparagus and pops it into her mouth, with an expressive look at Carter, as if to say, "Whatever made me come here tonight?" Close-up, Carter. He shrugs, sticks his tongue against his cheek, looks ceilingward, and makes cabalistic marks on the tablecloth with the end of his knife. Close-up, Mrs. Mason. She ignores her food and beats with her fingertips on the edge of the table. She seems to be nursing some secret grievance and stewing about it. Close-up, Johnny. He saws away at a piece of meat that is making a bum out of his knife. He gives up and leans forward with a gesture of his hand as if he is about to make a desperate effort to renew the conversation. But the effort is abortive. He finds he has nothing to say. Close shot, Jane and Doolittle. She turns to Doolittle. Jane, rather loudly, in deference to Doolittle's deafness, says, "Would you care for some more wine, Judge Doolittle?" "Yes, thank you." Jane, to Annie at the other end of the table. "Annie, more wine for Judge Doolittle." Annie loudly responds, "There ain't any more." Doolittle decides to start on his salad. He can't find a salad fork. With a crucified expression, he uses his meat fork. Annie starts towards the kitchen. Jane sharply says, "A salad fork for Judge Doolittle, Annie." Annie, as she exits into the kitchen, "I put one there." The swinging door closes behind her. Jane desperately tries to change the subject. "Funniest thing happened to me the other day, Judge Doolittle. I ran across the yearbook of my husband's class at college, and in the class prophecy he was picked out as the one most likely to succeed." Judge Doolittle, "What's that?" Jane, louder, "The other day I ran across the yearbook of my husband's class at college, and in the class prophecy—" "Oh, yes, yes, yes." "Higgins against Higgins was quite an important case, wasn't it, Judge Doolittle? We like to think all of our cases are important. The little client of today may be the big client of tomorrow." Close-up, Carter. "Oh, you're so right, Judge." Close shot, Doolittle and Jane. Judge Doolittle says, "For instance, we got a client the other day." Full shot. Annie has been serving the dessert. She sets a plate of almost liquid ice cream before the judge. He stares at it. Jane says, "Oh dear," at the breaking point, but desperately trying to control herself. "What happened to your ice cream, Annie?" Annie continues serving the ice cream and says, "I told you to have the ice box fixed." She puts a piece of paper alongside Jane's plate. Jane looks at the note. Insert the note. It reads, "I've got to leave. I want my pay. $12. Full shot, the table. Annie is standing near Jane. Jane hands her the note and whispers to her, "Annie, give this note to Mr. Mason." Annie departs with the note. Close up, Jane. She looks across the table and tries to mouth the import of Annie's message to Johnny. Close up, Johnny. He mouths back inquiries. He can't make out what Jane is trying to convey. Close up, Carter. Looking from Jane to Johnny, wondering what's going on. Medium shot. Jane gives up and turns to Doolittle. Jane says, "Is it true, Judge Doolittle, something new is going to happen in the firm this week?" Johnny, by this time, has gotten the significance of the note. He rises and starts out. "Excuse me." Judge Doolittle says, "What?" Johnny says, "Excuse me, please." Johnny exits. Doolittle continues. Oh yes, we're going to have a blood transfusion. I'm only speaking metaphorically, of course. What I mean is we're getting some new blood into the firm, appointing a junior partner. Jane says, "Oh." She looks frantically towards the kitchen. Interior, kitchen. Johnny. "You couldn't stay and serve the coffee, could you, Annie?" "No. Here's $7, and I'll send you. I want my $12 now." "All right, Annie, all right. I'll get it for you. I'll get it, maybe." He turns to go out. Medium shot, dining room. Judge Doolittle says, "That's how to keep an old firm young. I've been doing this every 5 years, and it's quite a job to pick the right man." Johnny comes out of the kitchen. Doolittle frowns at the interruption. Jane says, "Johnny." Johnny, as he passes the table, "Excuse me." He proceeds to the living room. Mrs. Mason, answering Doolittle, says, "I shouldn't think so. Surely it's a question of merit." Interior, bedroom, close shot, Johnny. He rummages through Jane's bureau drawer. Stockings and handkerchiefs fall out, etc. Finds her purse, takes out a small roll of bills, closes the purse, restores it to its place. Full shot, dining room. Judge Doolittle says, "As a rule, I always trust my own judgment, but when it comes to picking men..." Johnny enters from the living room. Jane says, "Johnny." Johnny says, "Excuse me." He exits again into the kitchen. Doolittle is more annoyed than ever at the continuous interruptions. "I think there's nothing like a woman's intuition." Carter says, "Oh, you're so right, Judge." Judge Doolittle says, "Of course, Eunice doesn't know much about law, but she's traveled all over the world, and she does know people. 5 years ago, it was at her suggestion that I took Mr. Hutch into the firm. It worked out so well." Johnny enters from the kitchen and takes his place at the table. He says, "I beg your pardon. I'm very sorry." Judge Doolittle continues his speech. "That this year I have again consulted my daughter, and now a new name moves up on the door of our offices." Johnny and Jane listen eagerly. "Beginning next Monday, the name of the firm will be Doolittle." Quick close-ups group at the table, waiting expectantly for Doolittle to announce the new firm member. "Messerschmitt, Doolittle, Hutch, and Carter." Close-up, Jane. She reacts in keen disappointment. She looks across the table at Johnny. Close-up, Johnny. Trying to rise to the occasion, he stands. "Well, Carter, congratulations. It's wonderful. I always knew you had it in you. I'd like to propose a toast to the new partner. Only we seem to have run out of wine. There isn't any more wine." His voice cracks on the last word and he sinks to his chair. Big close-up, Jane. She looks at Johnny trying to smile, the tears running down her face. Fade out. Fade in. Autumn. Interior anteroom doctor's suite. Close shot door, upon which is written, "Dr. Langham." Camera draws back as the door opens and Jane comes out, excited, starry-eyed, almost cross-eyed with the import of news she had just received from the doctor. Camera pans with her and she goes to a desk at which is seated a nurse, busily engaged with filing cards. Jane tremulously says, "May I have some paper and an envelope, please?" "Certainly." She hands Jane a sheet of office stationery and an envelope. "Thank you." Camera pans Jane over to a little writing desk. She sits down, reaches for the pen, and draws a large heart in the center of the sheet. In her excitement, she begins to hum, "Columbia, the gem of the ocean," as she starts to write a note within the heart. Nurse says, "Would you like a stamp?" "No, thank you." Close shot, Jane at writing desk. Humming and writing. She looks up. "Could I have a safety pin, please?" "Surely." Nurse comes into the shot and puts a safety pin on the desk. "Thank you." Nurse exits. Jane fixes the safety pin on the note she has just written, folds the note, and closes it in the envelope and writes furiously on envelope. She seals the letter and rises. Camera pans with her as she starts to exit. The nurse, amused, turns to watch her leave. As Jane disappears through the door, dissolve to interior courtroom, close-up Johnny. Camera panning with him as he paces before the jury box. We meet a new and startlingly different Johnny. He may be a worm to Doolittle, a schnook to Jane, and little Lord Fauntleroy to his mother, but here he is in his element, the flaming advocate concluding his eloquent summation to the jury in a burst of forensic fireworks. He says, "And I tell you, gentlemen of the jury, the defendant Higgins, with unbrotherly venom and motivated solely by a desire maliciously and hatefully to interfere with his brother's rights and privileges," close shot the jurors. The foreman is consulting a timetable. Johnny's voice, "deliberately and improperly diverted the waters of the stream." Insert timetable, featuring schedules of trains running to Long Island. The foreman's finger is running down a list of trains. Now the train after the 4 o'clock is circled. Medium shot, courtroom, including judge, Johnny, clerk, jury, etc. Johnny continues, "Well, gentlemen, I leave the determination of these matters in your hands, confident that your verdict will bring justice to my client, the plaintiff in this action." Johnny wipes his brow and subsides. Close up, judge. He comes to with a start from something very closely approximating a nap and shakes his head to clear his drowsy wits. He says, "Gentlemen of the jury." Medium shot, jurors. The foreman's face puckered with anxiety as he looks at the timetable. Judge's voice, "You will now retire to arrive at a verdict." The jury starts to file out of the jury box. Close shot, Johnny. Seated at counsel table making notes. A bailiff comes over and whispers in his ear. Johnny's face lights up and he turns and looks towards the other end of the courtroom. He rises and waves joyously, then starts eagerly out of shot. Close shot, last row of seats in courtroom. Jane is seated there. Johnny comes into the scene and she moves over one seat to make room for him. He drops into the seat alongside and puts his arm around her waist. Jane says, "I came in just as you started your summation, Johnny. It was wonderful." "You should have been here when I cross-examined Higgins." "Your Higgins?" "No, the other one." Man passing through the scene says, "You skinned him alive." Johnny, "I tore him apart. I really cut him up." Jane says, "Johnny." She hands him an envelope. He grins at her and looks at it. Insert the envelope. On Dr. Langham's stationery and marked, "Johnny, rush, urgent, vital." Two shot, Johnny and Jane. Johnny opens the letter and reads it. Jane is watching Johnny with bated breath. Johnny's eyes open wide as he reads the letter and begins to gather its import. Insert the letter. Instead of one heart-shaped enclosure, there are two joined together by the safety pin. Within the large heart is written, "The party of the second part wishes to announce to the party of the first part that we're going to be in the market for a lot of these for the..." Here a curved arrow points to the safety pin. Within the small heart is written, "Party of the third part." Two shot, Johnny and Jane. Johnny looks up at Jane. He is speechless with surprise and joy. He tries to say something, but his bobbing Adam's apple prevents speech. He suddenly shouts, "Jane!" He takes her into his arms. 3 men come into the shot. "Congratulations, Mason. Good work. You did a swell job." Fade out. Fade in. Late spring. Exterior hospital, close shot. A tablet. It reads Manhattan Maternity Hospital. Dissolve to interior private room in hospital. Close shot, Johnny. Asleep in bed. He has taken a room next to Jane's in the hospital. A blinking neon sign from outside window is flashing in his face. Camera moves back as he moves restlessly and suddenly awakes with nightmarish movements. Stupefied with sleep, he fumbles with the clock on the bedside table. Insert clock. It indicates a few minutes to 4 o'clock. Hospital room, medium shot. Johnny leaps out of bed, still more asleep than awake, takes another look at the clock, then quickly comes to life. He blunders into his bathrobe and slippers, putting on the former as he exits room. Interior hospital corridor, close shot at door. As Johnny, still half asleep, comes into the hall, camera pans with him to adjoining room. Johnny listens, hears nothing. He knocks softly on door, gets no answer, hesitates, and then softly opens the door. Looks into the room. Medium shot, the room. It is brightly lit. Camera moves up to the bed. It is empty, but not made up. Close up, Johnny. He takes in the significance of the empty bed and registers accordingly. Interior hospital corridor, long shot. Johnny streaks away from his wife's room and runs down the corridor. As he reaches the end of corridor, dissolve to interior, anteroom, obstetrician section, close shot at door. It opens and Johnny, wild-eyed, pops in. A nurse walks into the scene and bars his further progress. Johnny asks, "Is it happening?" Nurse says, "It's happening." "Why didn't they wake me? I want to be with her. I've got a right to be with my wife, haven't I?" "All right, wait a minute. You can't go in there until you put this on." He waits, tremblingly, looking towards the opposite door. The nurse comes back with surgical gown and mask. She helps him with the garment and mask. He keeps looking towards the opposite door. Close shot, opposite door. The door swings open for a moment as another nurse comes out of the delivery room. A quick glimpse of the activity inside before the door swings shut. Interior delivery room, medium shot. Shooting towards door to the anteroom. Johnny enters, walking towards operating table. Close shot, Jane, taking in only her face as Johnny comes up. Anesthesiologist in background. Jane sees Johnny and is just barely able to smile, makes a weak effort to say, "Hello." Close up, Johnny. His lips move under the mask with answering greeting. Close shot, anesthesiologist, as he prepares ether mask. Close shot, mask coming over Jane's face. Close shot, Johnny. He has picked up Jane's hand, and we get the reaction of the ether on her from the manner in which her hand droops out of his. Medium shot. Across Johnny's back as he steps away from table. Beyond can be seen doctor anesthesiologist's activity, but Johnny's body covers view of Jane. Close up, Johnny. He reacts to activity. Close flashes of various details of delivery. Nurses, doctor, assistants, busy expert hands handing such instruments as may be permissible to doctor, etc. Over these shots, low and indistinguishable, come the various voices of doctor, nurses, and other appropriate sounds. There are, however, no sounds of pain as Jane is under half ether. Close up, Johnny. Reacts to activity. Close shot, Johnny's eyes. In the eyes is double printed the activity in the delivery room. Close-up of anesthesiologist with bag, obstetrician and assistants showing their exertions, intercut with Johnny's agonized face watching. Long shot delivery room. Johnny in foreground blocking out Jane's body. We get a glimpse of the doctor and nurse as obstetrician holds the newborn baby. Close-up obstetrician. As he holds the baby up by the feet, the obstetrician is slapping the baby's feet. It emits a tiny squeak. Obstetrician says, "Come on, you can do better than that." Slaps the baby's feet again. Close up, Johnny, watching, his eyes almost popping out of his head. Into the shot comes the querulous wail of the newborn babe. "Attaboy!" Long shot from Johnny's point of view. Activity around operating table. It starts to go out of focus. Close up, Johnny. He slips to the floor in a dead faint. Fade out. Fade in. Interior hospital, cashier's window, close up. A hospital bill with itemized account of hospital expenses made out to John H. Mason. Cashier's hand comes into shot and stamps a paid rubber stamp form on bill. Cashier's voice. Now he's all yours, Mr. Mason. Camera draws back as we see Johnny standing in front of Cashier's cage. Cashier hands Johnny the bill. Johnny, as he looks at the bill, says, "All mine." Cashier says, "Come in again sometime." "Thank you, I will." He starts to go, then realizing the import of her remark, stops for a moment, embarrassed. Yeah. He exits precipitously. Fade out. Fade in. Long shot, corner, 5th Avenue. As the traffic sign goes to stop for 5th Avenue traffic, a 5th Avenue bus, a carriage, a taxi, and a truck pull up and stop. In the foreground is a mounted policeman directing the traffic. Close-up traffic signal. Light turns to go for 5th Avenue. Long shot, 5th Avenue corner, as before. Traffic stands immovable. Cars behind start honking. People on bus, coachman, truck driver, etc., still looking down into taxi. Irate cop gallops over towards taxi. Close shot. Across roof of taxi as cop rides into the scene. Cop, bawling at driver. "Hey, what do you think you're doing holding up traffic?" He suddenly looks down and his expression changes to a broad grin. "Oh, what is it, boy or girl?" Interior, taxi, close shot, Jane and Johnny. Jane is holding the baby. Johnny grins proudly. Jane indicates Johnny's expression. Jane says, "What do you think?" Close shot, cop. The cop smiles, understanding. The horns start furiously honking and blowing again. Cop turns and starts furiously after the impatient honkers. "Hey, cut that out. Do you want to wake that baby?" "All right, get going." Traffic starts to move. Interior, taxi, Johnny and Jane. Johnny, curiously embarrassed. Jane, proud. The baby alone is indifferent. Johnny? Uh-huh. Like him? Sort of. Don't you think he's just beautiful? He looks old, don't you think? Old? What do you mean, old? I mean, he looks as though he were 6 months old or a year at least. Oh, Johnny, you're silly. But don't you think he's just beautiful? I hope he grows up to look like you. How can he? He has all your features. I don't see how you can tell that by looking at that face. Close-up baby, who looks like no one on earth. Just look at the way his eyes crinkle. Just the way yours do when you're happy. He doesn't look happy, he looks kind of bored. Well, you'd be bored too if you'd been through what he has. But don't you think he's just beautiful? Johnny has put out his hand. The baby has gripped his finger. Insert baby's finger gripping Johnny's. Boy, what a grip. But don't you think he's just beautiful? Fade out. Fade in. Interior apartment bathroom next morning. Late spring. Open on close shot. Baby and portable canvas baby's bath setup in bathroom. Jane's hands are sponging the baby. Johnny's voice. Well, fella, how do you like your first bath? Camera draws back to reveal Jane, in house gown, giving the baby its first bath at home. Johnny, in shirt sleeves, is sitting on the edge of the tub, fascinated. Mrs. Mason stands alongside, watching and coaching. The advent of the baby has materially changed the appearance of the bathroom. A clothesline is rigged across the room, and on it hang 3 diapers held by clothespins. A baby's scale sets on the closed seat of the toilet, or on a clothes hamper, or etc. Jane handles the baby very gingerly. Mrs. Mason says, "Be sure you soap his head thoroughly. It prevents cradle cap." Yes, Mother, I know. Mrs. Mason. Itty Johnny doesn't want nasty old cradle cap, does he? Johnny. Look at those shoulders. Can I do something, Jane? Please. He reaches for baby as Jane lifts him out of the water. This movement makes Jane almost let it slip through her hands, and she exclaims in fright, "Now look what you've done. I almost dropped him. Do move over, Johnny, please." Her back to camera, she holds the baby in her arms as she pulls over the canvas top of the tub and lays the baby on it. Mrs. Mason, if you'd let me show you how. Jane, not quite so pleasantly, I know how. They showed me at the hospital. She is now drying the baby, her back still to camera. Mrs. Mason, you don't rub the baby dry, you just pat him. I am patting him. He looks red. Maybe the water was too hot. No, Mother, it was just right. I tested it. Was its little water too hot for little Johnny? Johnny, will you hand me his shirt? Johnny reaches for the wrong garment. Not that one, this one. She gets the shirt, starts to put it on. Look at the chest on him. Can't I help? Neither woman pays attention to him. Mrs. Mason, be careful of his little head, my dear. I will, Mother. Johnny, you'd better go in the kitchen and warm his milk. Pan with Johnny as he starts out of the room. He almost collides with the clothesline and has to stoop in order to get by it. Almost knocks over the scales as he exits. Mrs. Mason calling to Johnny, not too hot, John. Close shot, Jane. The baby is now all dressed for the night, and Jane has him safely cradled in her arms. Jane says, Hallelujah, with great sigh of relief. He's bathed. Dissolve to interior living room at crib. Mrs. Mason stands over the crib. Jane is wearily stretched out in a chair near the crib, her arms and legs stretched in fatigue, her eyes closed. The mother just back from the hospital. The baby is crying lustily. They look harassed. Mrs. Mason, touch of colic. Jane, without opening her eyes, wearily, no, Mother, he's just hungry. Mrs. Mason, with maddening tolerance of her daughter-in-law's stupidity, I'm sorry, my dear, but it's colic. He's been crying for 5 minutes. Jane closes her eyes and controls herself with effort. Jane, sitting up a little, calling impatiently, Johnny, where's that bottle? Johnny comes in from kitchen, triumphantly carrying the baby bottle. Johnny goes towards the crib. Here, fella, the feed bag. Close shot, Johnny at crib. The baby still squalling. Johnny trying to put the bottle into his hands. Close shot, baby. Baby's hands fighting off bottle as he continues to bawl. Close shot, Johnny. Jane comes into scene. She yanks the bottle from Johnny. They don't eat with their hands, you dope. She rolls up her sleeve and tests the temperature of the milk by spilling a few drops on her forearm, looking at Johnny in a superior manner and shaking her head. She lowers the bottle towards the crib. Close up, baby. As Jane forces the bottle into its mouth, his squalling ceases instantly and he sucks the nipple with vehement appreciation. Medium shot. Again, Jane goes to chair and sinks down wearily. The doorbell rings. Johnny exits to answer it. Jane looks at the contented baby, then speaks to Mrs. Mason. You see, Mother, he was hungry. Mrs. Mason, if he were fed on time, he wouldn't cry. Jane, her eyes closed, her hands tightening on the arm of the chair. As soon as we're organized. Mrs. Mason interrupting. Too bad he has to be fed on a bottle. Jane sighs grimly. I haven't heard the baby complain yet. John never saw a bottle till he was 6 months old. Close-up of Jane, controlling herself, speaks as inaudibly as possible, practically to herself. I won't say anything, I won't say anything, I won't say anything. Mrs. Mason's voice, what's that, my dear? Back to scene. Johnny comes in, carrying a flat, small package already half unwrapped. What do you think? It's a present from old Granite Puss. He sits down beside Jane, starts unwrapping the package. Jane says, I'll bet it's a summons. Johnny, no, it's a bank book. Insert, Johnny's hands finishing opening package. It contains a bank book showing that an account has been opened in the name of John H. Mason, Jr., with an opening deposit of $10, and accompanying it is Judge Doolittle's business card. Johnny's hand turns the card over. On it is handwritten, A penny earned is a penny saved. Close shot group. Johnny says, He's deposited $10. He hands Jane the open book. Mrs. Mason glances over Jane's shoulder. Johnny, say, that's a lot of money for the little guy. Jane, I hope it doesn't plunge Doolittle into bankruptcy. Johnny, after that hospital bill, he's got more cash in the bank than I have. Mrs. Mason, I think it's very considerate of Judge Doolittle to think about the baby's future. Jane, I'm not worried about his future. It's the present that bothers me. Where are we going to put him? Johnny, why can't he stay in our room? Jane, you know he kept you awake last night. Mrs. Mason, you should have taken that into consideration, my dear, before you rented this apartment. Jane, too tired to argue, I know I should have. If my own room weren't so small. Oh, I wouldn't think of it, dear. Close shot at door, leading to entry hall. Hilda, the current cook, stands listening. Johnny's voice. We could keep him in our room days and in the living room nights. Jane's voice. That's too far from the bedroom. Well, in the dining room then. It's too near the kitchen, but I suppose we'll have to. Hilda shows that she doesn't relish the idea of the baby being near the kitchen. She coughs to attract attention. Mrs. Jane's voice. Yes, Hilda? Could I please see you a minute? Jane comes into the shot. What is it, Hilda? Your mother-in-law hired me when you was away, but she didn't say why you was away. You mean you don't approve of my having a baby? That's your business. You can have as many babies as you like. Thank you, that's big of you. But my business is cooking. You get somebody else to wash the diapers. She turns and starts to exit. Jane calls after her almost tearfully. You're fired. Hilda pays no attention to this parting sally, but continues her march across the room. We hear Johnny's voice as Jane turns back into the room. He's talking to the baby, very cheerful, oblivious to all the agony. Don't you worry, Johnny. Follow Jane as she goes back into the living room and sinks again into chair, almost exhausted. Close shot, Jane in chair. Speaks softly, almost to herself. I wish I could go back to the hospital. Close shot, crib, Johnny talking to the baby. As soon as the lease is up, we'll get a house in the country with a room all your own, and a garden to ride your bicycle in, and... He stops suddenly, open-mouthed, and looks up at Jane and his mother. Look! Mother, Jane, look! The baby! He's smiling! He's smiling at me! Mrs. Mason bends over the crib. Jane runs in to look. Close up, baby, smiling. Back to scene. Mrs. Mason straightens and shakes her head condescendingly. That's gas. Fade out. Fade in. Insert invitation. 10th reunion, class of 28. You'll see all the old faces Wednesday evening, October 5th. Hotel Astor, Blue Room. Make your reservations now. Over this comes the sound of a clock starting to strike 12. Dissolve to entry hall, interior, Jane and Johnny's apartment, night. The hall is lit only by a dim light from the living room. The sound of the clock striking continues. The sound of a key turning in the lock. The door opens and Johnny enters. He is in dinner clothes, black overcoat, and scarf. He seems unusually dejected. He softly closes the door behind him and starts on tiptoes towards the bedroom, camera trucking with him. Attracted by the light from the living room, he stops in the doorway and looks in at interior living room, close shot, Jane on divan. From his angle, Jane in a warm bathrobe is curled up asleep. On the floor by the divan is an open book, face up. A lamp on a nearby table is the only light in the room. Close shot, Johnny. He tiptoes into the room, taking off his hat as he crosses and sits down on the floor near the divan. Looks at Jane a moment, moody and licked. Then he notices the open book on the floor. He puts his elbows on his knees, cups his chin, and stares at the open book. Insert book. It is a yearbook of Johnny's college. Open at the page bearing Johnny's picture. Over Johnny's picture, the words Class of 1928, and under Johnny's picture, Most Likely to Succeed, John Horace Mason. Close shot, divan. Jane stirs and opens her eyes, sees Johnny. Close up, Johnny, from Jane's angle. Unaware, Jane has awakened, his expression still moody and despondent, staring at the book. Close up, Jane. From her expression, we know that now she understands Johnny's mood. Medium shot. Smiling, Jane sits, puts her arms around Johnny and kisses him. How was it, Johnny? Oh, swell. Who was there? Oh, just the same old crowd, only 10 years older. Who spoke, Johnny? Ed O'Malley made quite a speech, all about how he bought that seat on the stock exchange, and then Joe Kendall just got back from opening up a London office. Did you make a speech? Yeah. What did you say? You know, the things you have to say at a reunion, not much. What did you say, Johnny? Well, my speech was pretty short. What would I have to say? The man most likely to succeed. Bitterly, Johnny sees the book on the floor. Well, I think you have, and I bet your speech was swell. They kiss. Did you tell them that funny story you told me yesterday? No, I didn't think of it. All I could think of was my achievements, what I've accomplished, and how far I've gone. I suppose I should have told them how I used your money, all of it, to buy the furniture for this apartment. Now that's silly. Your money, my money, what's the difference? It wasn't much anyway. I should have told them how the baby has to sleep in the dining room. Well, what of it? And it's only temporary till we get a new apartment. Because I can't afford to get you a decent place to live. Stop it. Don't say those things. Sometimes I get so mad at you I can't see straight. Sometimes I get so mad at myself I can't see at all. I know what happened. The dinner disagreed with you. What did you have? I don't know. I didn't eat any of it. Now I know what's wrong. You're hungry. She rises, grabs his arm, and yanks him up. Come on, honey. I'll get you something out of the icebox. She starts to pull him from the living room. Dissolve 2. Interior kitchen. Johnny and Jane enter. Jane proceeds to the icebox, opens it, and starts to pry into it, taking things out. Now let's see. Here's some cheese you like, and a whole cold chicken staring us right in the face. Which? Chicken. Jane takes the platter and puts it on the kitchen table. The trouble with you is you let people step on you. You do all the work in that office. Coffee? No, milk. Jane takes milk from the icebox and sets it on the table. You've forgotten more about law than Carter will ever know. How do you expect people to recognize your value if you don't recognize it yourself? White or rye? Rye. She goes to bread box, rummages in it. They couldn't get along without you for 1 minute, and you know it. Everybody knows it. She gets bread knife and starts to butter bread. Johnny eats a leg of chicken. Everybody but Doolittle. He knows it too, but he takes advantage of you. I told you when he promoted Carter over your head that you should have quit. Walk right out on him. Now, Jane, how could I? What about... I know, your mother and I wish you'd forget about us. If I lost my job... But you wouldn't. They'd never let you go. You're far too valuable. If you left, Doolittle would crawl to you on his hands and knees and beg you to come back. Ha, on his hands and knees. You don't know Doolittle. I know you. All you've got to do is speak up. Stand right up to Doolittle. Don't ask for your rights. Demand them. He reaches for her hand and looks at the simple wedding band on one finger. Remember the day in Boston when I got you this ring? I promised to get you a better one later. I don't want a better one later. You like the platinum one with the diamonds. That can wait. And the mink coat can wait too, I suppose. Probably in about 300 years I can afford to buy you one. What are you, a man or a mouse? A mouse. Jane grabs the kitchen knife and waves it in front of Johnny as she talks. John Mason, you know what's the matter with you? You're too modest. You don't appreciate yourself. I do want that platinum ring, and I want a fur coat. Not the mink, but a fur coat. And I want a honeymoon on the Normandy. And I want an apartment that's big enough for your mother and the baby so the baby wouldn't have to sleep in the dining room. You can get them for me. You can get everything I want, everything that's coming to me, but first you've got to get what's coming to you. If only I knew how to go about it. It's easy. You think it's easy. You just walk right into the office and you say, Jane, you don't walk into Judge Doolittle's office. He sends for you. Well, this time you walk in. You go right up to him and you say, Judge Doolittle, there's something I've got to say to you right now. You can't talk to him like that, though. Have you ever tried? Now, Jane, you don't understand. If I barged in there like that, he'd say, What is it, Mason? Sit down. He never asked me to sit down in his life. Well, then stand up, but don't let him interrupt you. Speak your piece. Yeah, well, now that, speak your piece. It's easy to do here in the kitchen. You get downtown. Well, downtown or uptown, what difference does it make? You're not asking a favor of him, you're demanding your rights. He'll listen. Make him listen. All right, okay, all right. What'll I say? Jane has been gathering up the foodstuffs. She shoves what's left of the chicken into the icebox, turns out the light, and they start out of the kitchen. You'll say, interior, dining room. Jane and Johnny enter and start through to entry hall. Judge Doolittle, I've been working for you now for 5 years, and I've given you everything that's in me, every ounce. They stop at the crib, look down at the sleeping baby. During the rest of the scene, Jane changes the baby's diaper as they talk. John is still chewing on the leg of chicken. Well, all right, what'll he say? There's no doubt about it, Mason. I've never questioned your ability or your loyalty. And I'll say, Judge Doolittle, what are you going to do about it? I hate to think what he'll say. He'll say, Mason, what do you expect me to do? And you'll say, the right thing, Judge Doolittle. I want more money and I want to be taken into the firm. And he'll say plenty. No matter what he'll say, you'll say, Jane has finished changing the baby. With a last fond look, she turns and starts into the bedroom, Johnny following. Interior, bedroom, Jane and Johnny enter. Jane still talking. Jane, speaking as if she were addressing Judge Doolittle in person. Judge Doolittle, I either get a raise and a junior partnership or else. Johnny waits breathlessly as she continues. Or else you can accept my resignation effective immediately. Johnny, with grim determination. Effective immediately. That's all right, Jane. That's a good idea. I'm going through with it. One of these days. One of these days is tomorrow. Tomorrow? Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Well, if you think I should. There's no time like the present. Let's start at the beginning, Jane. I'll walk into his office and I'll say, Judge Doolittle, there's something I've got to say to you right now. Johnny, waving his shoe at his reflection in the mirror. Judge Doolittle, there's something I've got to say to you right now. Jane, either I get a raise and a junior partnership. Johnny, either I get a raise and a junior partnership. Jane, or you can accept my resignation. Johnny, or you can accept my resignation, without Jane's cue, effective immediately. Jane, tenderly and proud, effective immediately. Johnny, not bad. Dissolve 2. Interior, bedroom, close shot. An alarm clock on the night table next to Johnny's bed. It registers shortly before 3 a.m. Camera pans over to Jane. She is asleep. She wakes suddenly and looks over towards Johnny's pillow, sees that it's empty, then attracted by a sound looks towards window. Close shot at window. Silhouetted in the moonlight is a figure in pajamas. It is Johnny, gesticulating fiercely, rehearsing in a sibilant whisper. I've been working in this office for the last 5 years, and there's something I want to tell you right now. Either I get a raise and a junior partnership, or else. Close up, Jane, who repeats tenderly, or else. She smiles and closes her eyes. Fade out. Fade in. Interior, Johnny's private office, next day. Open on close shot, pieces of scratch paper littering Johnny's glass-top desk, covered with scribbled designs and doodlings. A hand comes into shot and draws 4 large exclamation points on one of the pieces of paper. Under the glass tops are many snapshots of Jane and the baby in various poses. Camera draws back, and we reveal that it is Johnny who has been sitting at his desk scribbling. He throws his pencil down and rises, starts to pace up and down the room nervously. He mumbles to himself, rehearsing the speech he is going to make to Judge Doolittle. Johnny, pacing. A raise and a junior partnership or else. The fusty old bookkeeper pokes his head in the door and Johnny looks up, embarrassed. Bookkeeper, motioning. Judge Doolittle is in. Johnny. Okay. The bookkeeper exits. Johnny starts on another quick mumbled rehearsal, pacing again. Or else you can accept my resignation effective immediately. Carter, appearing in doorway. What is it, a jury case? Johnny whirls, guiltily and embarrassed. Johnny. Now, never mind, I'm thinking. Carter holds out papers to Johnny. Here are the papers in City against Consolidated. Johnny takes the papers without answering. Carter. I want you to drop over to Consolidated and see their accountants. Johnny. Okay. Carter goes down the corridor, just missing a collision with the office boy who pops his head in at Johnny's door. Office boy to Johnny. Psst. Imitates Doolittle by flipping back his coat and motions back towards Doolittle's office with his thumb. He just got in. Okay. As he pops out again, Johnny looks haggard and gulps. He stands motionless a moment, then in frantic hurry starts to straighten his tie. He lays the papers on his desk, walks quickly to the door, and puts his hand on the knob. Dissolve to interior corridor outside Doolittle's door. Johnny stands there, gets a grip on himself, and knocks timidly. Of course there is no response. Doolittle couldn't possibly have heard the knock. He knocks again, just as softly, and hearing no answer, turns and is about to go back to his office when Doolittle's voice comes through the door. Come in. Interior, Doolittle's office, close shot, at desk. Doolittle is frowning over some papers in his hand. Johnny stalks into the shot, blurts out his rehearsed speech. Johnny. Judge Doolittle, there's something I've got to say to you right now. Doolittle is intent on the income tax statement. Johnny coughs gently and continues. Judge Doolittle, I've been working in this office. Judge Doolittle, oh, it's you. You're just the one I want to see. Indicates a chair by his side. Sit down. Johnny, surprised at the unexpected invitation, sits on the edge of the chair and waits. Doolittle leans back in his swivel chair, adjusts his glasses, and rocks slowly, fixing a basilisk gaze on Johnny. Mason. Yes, sir. You've been doing mighty good work lately. Johnny smiles. The old man is actually going to make it easy for him. Thank you, Judge. You've been capable, dependable, and loyal, right from the start. Johnny is so tickled he actually crosses his legs. His chest comes out a little. That's mighty nice of you, Judge. But Mason, these are extraordinary times, for all of us. Johnny uncrosses his legs. Some of our biggest clients are affected. They all complain they're practically working for the government. Johnny is rigid in his chair again. Most of them claim it'll be all they can do to stay in business till the next election. So they're cutting expenses right and left, and we're the first to feel it. Naturally, we have to do something about it. Naturally. What? Naturally. I don't want to cut down the personnel of my staff if I can possibly help it. Wouldn't be constructive. So the only way out, as I can see it, is to tighten our belts. I'm asking everyone to take a 25% cut. I'm starting by taking a substantial cut in my own personal drawing account. It's a sacrifice, but it hits all of us. These are days of sacrifice. I know, Judge, but these are times when we all have to put our shoulders to the wheel, if we're to survive. Yes, sir, our shoulders to the wheel. Only I'm glad you understand, Mason. I appreciate your cooperation. Thank you, sir. Doolittle's phone rings. Hello? Excuse me, Mason. Johnny rises and starts out. We hear Doolittle continuing into telephone. Hello, Commissioner. You know that little piece of property on Park Avenue? Well, if the price is right. Interior passageway outside Doolittle's office. Close shot at door. Johnny comes out, his face a mask of doom as he starts back to his office. Fade out. Fade in. Same night. Interior entry hall, close shot at door. Johnny enters. We can see at once that our hero has sought comfort and slight consolation in the grape. He has had a few drinks, and his courage has obviously been falsely bolstered by the liquor. He is slightly tight, but in no sense drunk. He glares defiantly ahead, then slams the door violently shut. Interior, Mrs. Mason's bedroom. Close shot at bed. The slamming of the door awakes Mrs. Mason, and she sits quickly up as if she were goosed. Trucking shot, Johnny. Making as much noise as possible, Johnny goes into the living room, turns on the switch which lights the central lighting fixture, and goes from lamp to lamp, turning them all on. Then he stomps into the dining room, still making as much noise as possible, turns on all the dining room lights, and stomps on out to the kitchen. Close shot at crib and dining room. The baby wakes up and lets out a yelp. Interior, Jane's bedroom. Jane hears the baby cry and gets out of bed, exiting towards dining room. Interior, kitchen. Johnny opens the icebox, brings out a bottle of milk, and starts pouring it into a glass. The bottle falls to the floor with a crash. The door opens a crack, and Lily sticks her head out. Did you want something, Mr. Mason? No, thank you, Lily. Lily's head disappears. Interior, dining room, close shot, at crib. Jane quiets the baby. In a minute, Johnny comes out of the kitchen, not bothering to turn out the lights after him. His hat and coat are still on. His overcoat swings open, and we see his suit and coat splattered with milk. He looks at Jane defiantly. Well? Jane, still bending over the crib, very casually. Good morning, Johnny. Good morning. He exits towards bedroom, Jane following. Moving shot, Jane and Johnny en route to bedroom. How do you feel? I feel fine. He flings his hat across the room. They go into the bedroom. Interior, bedroom. As they enter, Johnny takes off both his overcoat and his suit coat at the same time and lets them slip to the floor. Johnny goes to the mirror, casually fixes her hair. What time is it? Johnny flings down his vest. In a mounting voice, each hour louder. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, high noon. Takes off his tie and throws it down. Jane, very quietly against his obviously synthetic rage. It's just 2, isn't it? Johnny, if you know the time, why do you ask me? What difference does it make what time it is? Starts to take off his shirt. I feel fine. He flings his shirt to the floor and exits to bathroom. Interior, bathroom. Johnny enters, bumps into the line of diapers, angrily rips down the cord, and the diapers fall to the floor. Close shot, Jane in bedroom. Now the sound of running water from the bathroom. Jane looks towards the bathroom with lowered lids, shakes her head, thinking what to do. Johnny's pants come flying into the room. Jane thinks a moment, then exits towards entry hall. Interior living room, full shot. Jane goes to light switch, puts out central chandelier light, then goes from lamp to lamp, putting out all lights Johnny lit. Interior, Mrs. Mason's bedroom, close up. Mrs. Mason. Her light is now on. She is sitting up in bed, listening with an expression of rage on her face. Finally, she turns the light out viciously and sinks back into bed to sleep. Interior, bathroom. Close shot, Johnny. Now in pajamas at sink. He is filling a glass with mouthwash. He starts to gargle. He gargles very loudly. Interior, Johnny and Jane's bedroom, medium shot. Jane enters and starts to pick up Johnny's clothes. Johnny's loud gargling comes from the bathroom. Jane neatly folds all Johnny's clothes and starts to hang them up in clothes closet as Johnny enters and goes directly to bed, pulling blankets over him. We do not see Johnny's feet in this scene. Close shot, Jane at closet. She carefully hangs up Johnny's clothes. Feel better now? Close shot at bed. Johnny curled up under blankets. I feel fine. Close up, Jane at clothes closet. Are you comfortable? Close up, Johnny in bed. Plenty comfortable. Are you sure you're comfortable? Close up, Jane at closet. She finishes hanging up Johnny's things. Certainly, I'm sure I'm comfortable. Jane looks down at the figure curled up under the blankets. Don't you think you'd be more comfortable if you took off your shoes? Close shot, Johnny. Johnny sits upright, flings the blankets off, and stares at his feet. He has forgotten to take off his shoes. He swings over and sits on the edge of the bed, bending down to take off his shoes. His fumbling fingers have trouble with the shoelaces. Jane enters. Can I help you? She gets down on her knees. I don't need any help. I feel fine. But he lets her take off his shoes anyway. He suddenly explodes into an indignant tirade against nothing in particular, waving his arms as Jane takes off his shoes. What time is it? Am I comfortable? How do I feel? You'd think I committed some sort of crime. You'd think I was on the witness stand. A man comes home looking for a little peace and quiet, and what happens? Blah, blah, blah. Why didn't I call you back? Why didn't I come home for supper? A million questions just because a man... Jane, without looking up, speaks matter-of-factly. I ran into Judge Doolittle this afternoon, after you saw him. There is a silence. She looks up to find Johnny staring at her. His face is such a mask of misery she can hardly stand it. She rises from her kneeling position, sits on the edge of the bed alongside of him, takes him in her arms and hugs him tightly. Oh, Johnny, you fool. What does it matter if you get a raise or a partnership or anything? Oh, Jane, I let you down. I'll always let you down. I'm no good. Johnny, don't say that. It was my fault for interfering. I made you do it, and I'm terribly sorry. I'll never do it again. Never. We don't need anything. We've got each other and the baby, our beautiful baby. You're all I have and all I want. And please, if you feel bad, I'll die. Johnny's head is lowered. He doesn't answer. A little pause. Johnny, Johnny, look at me and tell me you don't feel bad. Another second's pause, then Johnny slowly lifts his head with a grimace he thinks is a smile. His eyes are wet. Jane sees his expression and starts to cry. He is completely ashamed, puts his arms around her, and attempts to comfort her. Jane, I don't feel bad. They hold on to each other desperately, both of them crying all the more. Johnny, tears rolling down his cheeks. Jane, I don't feel bad. As Jane sobs convulsively, I feel fine, honest, I do. They cling to each other desperately. Jane kisses his tears away, laughing through her sobs. Johnny, the next time you go out and get tight, you'd better take me along with you, or I'll get a divorce. Johnny, abortive attempt at laughter. You'd better get a good lawyer. Jane, hysterical laughter. I've got a good lawyer. Close up, Johnny, with Jane's back to camera. Johnny gives a set-it little burp as we fade out. Fade in, montage, sheets of paper drifting down the screen. There are bills of all sorts, installment furniture, market, milk, telephone bill with discontinue threat. The bills are stamped overdue, please pay up, please remit, etc. Included, perhaps, is a reminder of a note from the Morris Plan Bank. The falling bills change to falling leaves. Dissolve to exterior Central Park, close-up baby crawling over grass. Over this comes the high-pitched voice of Lily. Keep coming, come on, keep coming, come on now. Camera draws back as we see that the baby is crawling after a little toy cat. Lily, Louise Beavers, on her hands and knees calling to the baby. If you want something, you gotta go get it. Full shot, taking in path along the grass. Jane comes into the shot and pauses as she hears Lily's voice. She seems weary and downhearted, but her face lights up as she looks off screen. She carries a folded newspaper in her hand. That's it. Come on now, come on. Jane starts towards them. Medium shot. The baby reaches the cat and grabs it as Jane comes into the shot. Lily laughs, high-pitched, as she sees Jane and clambers to her feet. She says excitedly, "Miss Mason, you should have seen him travel." Jane sinks wearily onto the park bench, dropping her newspaper beside her. Close shot at bench. Lily's smile changes to a look of concern as she looks at Jane. "Is you tired?" "I've been all over town, my head's splitting." Lily comes up behind her. "Lean back and let Lily rub the back of your neck." Jane's head goes back against the capacious bosom of Lily standing behind the bench. Lily starts to rub Jane's neck with strong, capable fingers. With a sigh of content, Jane closes her eyes. "Been visiting round, Miss Mason?" "Uh-huh." "Does Mr. Mason know you's looking for a job?" "Who says I'm looking for a job?" She looks back at Lily, sees that Lily is looking at something, and follows her gaze. Close shot, folded newspaper on bench. Open to the Situations Wanted ads. Back to scene. Jane realizes how Lily knows. "Lily, it isn't nice to go prying into other people's business." "Excuse me, Miss Mason." Jane closes her eyes again after a pause. "Lily, you must be the 15th woman I've had working for me since I've been married, and you're too good to be true. You're worth your weight in gold." Lily grins. "That's a lot of gold." Jane, almost breaking. "You're the best woman I've ever had in the house, just simply perfect. And that's why it just breaks my heart to have to tell you, never mind you, honey. I knows I'm a luxury." A moment's silence while Lily rubs Jane's neck. "I'd never let you go, never, only Shucks, honey. You ain't getting rid of me, you're just getting me off the budget. Is the head better?" "Much better." "I'll make such a mess of things without you." "No, you won't. You'll step right in and do the job. And it's a pretty good job, too. A whole lot better than you can get on the outside. Taking care of a nice young man, a sweet little baby, an old lady, that's just a little persnickety. That's 'cause she's getting along and don't have nothing to do." "I wish it were as simple as that." Lily reaches down and takes Jane's hand. "Lily's a lot older than you are, honey. She's done a lot of living and she's learned one thing. Never let the seeds stop you from enjoying the watermelon." Jane, rather wistfully and with slight bitterness. "It's all right if you've got watermelon." "Don't say that, Miss Mason. You got your watermelon, but you're choking up on all them little seeds. All I say is spit 'em out before they spoils your taste for the melon." Spit 'em out. Fade out. Fade in. Close up, huge sign. The words Happy New Year in blinking neon lights. Dissolve to interior living room, Mason apartment. Full shot. New Year's Eve. The room presents a sorry contrast to the gay revelry going on outside. There is a distinct aura of letdown and depression. Sitting in an easy chair is Mrs. Mason, a shawl over her shoulder, sniffing at a tube of Benzedrine and quite miserable from a cold. Johnny, in evening clothes, is sprawled on a window seat playing with the baby's toy cat, winding it up and listening morosely to the music box tune. The only sound, except for what drifts in from the celebration in the street, is the tune from the music box. Jane's wrap and Johnny's overcoat are draped over a chair. Close up, Mrs. Mason. She opens her mouth, fights it a moment, then sneezes violently. Medium shot, group. "Bless you." Another sneeze from Mrs. Mason. "Bless you." "Are you sure Carter has our telephone number?" Johnny, morosely. "Bless you." Another sneeze from Mrs. Mason. Jane, mournfully. "Bless you." She turns to Johnny. "Are you sure Carter has our telephone number?" Johnny, if he hasn't, he certainly has a telephone book. Then why do you suppose he hasn't at least called up? Mrs. Mason, sniffing. Perhaps he forgot all about it. Johnny, Mother, a man doesn't invite you to a New Year's Eve party and then just forget about it. Jane, maybe we ought to go join him at the party. Jane, I told you I don't know where the party is. He said he'd call for us here in his car at 9 o'clock sharp. Well, it's almost 11 now. Isn't the party also to announce his engagement to Eunice Doolittle? Something like that. Well, perhaps he thought it might be a little awkward to have you and Jane at his engagement party. Now, Mother, how could it be awkward? Awkward or not awkward, are we going to sit here all night waiting for him? Let's call him up. Johnny drops the cat to the floor, rises, and exits to outer hall. Mrs. Mason, almost as if she's talking to herself. All the same, it might be awkward. Jane, why should it be awkward? Before Mrs. Mason has a chance to go into detail, there's the sound of a little sneeze from the direction of the dining room. Jane quickly starts in that direction. Interior hall. Johnny viciously dialing his number. Johnny passing in background on way to dining room. Interior dining room, close shot at crib. Jane comes into shot just as the baby sneezes again. Close up, baby in crib. Sneezing. He has a runny nose. Close shot, Jane. She kisses the baby on the cheek, then puts her hand over his forehead and straightens up, camera panning with her. She looks off towards Mrs. Mason in the next room, presses her lips together, and shakes her head disgustedly. Johnny's voice drifts in from off-scene as he calls Carter's house. Interior living room. First, Johnny enters from the hall. Then Jane enters from the dining room. Johnny, they say at Carter's house he left 2 hours ago. We'd better forget it. Jane, the baby definitely has the sniffles. Mrs. Mason, talking through her head cold. All babies have sniffles this time of the year. He caught his cold from you, Mother. That's simply ridiculous. Matter of fact, I caught my cold from the baby. He's had sniffles all day. When I took his temperature, that's when he caught your cold. He certainly didn't. He had no temperature. It's all right, Johnny. It's just the sniffles. I suppose I ought to stay in my room all day. Now, Mother, that's silly. You don't have to do anything of the kind. Heaven knows I try to earn my room and board by being as helpful as I can. Oh, Mother, please, it's New Year's Eve. It's just like any other day as far as I'm concerned. You're both perfectly willing to leave me all alone to wait for the new year when perhaps it's the last new year I'll ever see. Mother, why do you keep saying things like that? There is a ring at the doorbell. It's Carter. Johnny exits to outer hall. Interior outer hall, full shot. Johnny comes up to the door with Jane behind him. He opens the door. Lily, all togged up in New Year's Eve finery and with traces of confetti on her clothes, comes in with a large basket in her hand. Evening, Mr. Mason. Hello, Lily. Happy New Year, Lily. Happy New Year, Miss Mason. I want to leave this with you. Lily hands Jane the basket. Jane lifts the paper and she and Johnny look into the basket. Lily, you sweet old thing. It's nothing at all. I had the day off, so I cooked up the chicken, and the place where I work give me the wine. Close up, Mrs. Mason in the living room. She is looking out disapprovingly towards the hall. Group shot in hall. Lily, Happy New Year to you all. Johnny, Happy New Year to you. He starts back into the living room. Jane, Happy New Year, Lily. Have a good time. All right, goodbye. Lily exits. Jane closes door and starts back towards living room. Interior living room, medium shot, as Johnny enters. That solves everything. Now we won't have to go out. We'll stay right here and celebrate. Jane now comes in carrying the basket. Sets it on the arm of Mrs. Mason's chair. We'll open up the wine now, and at midnight we'll have a grand feast on Lily's chicken. Come on, it's New Year's Eve. Let's have fun. Mrs. Mason, you know I get indigestion if I eat just before I go to bed. Sighs, looks over at chicken. Maybe there'll be some left over for me tomorrow. I never did approve of Lily. She's much too forward. But I do miss her cooking. Jane, hurt. That doesn't say much for mine. Oh, you'll learn, dear. It takes time, of course. Close shot, Jane. She grits her teeth and mutters, I won't say anything. She reaches for a book, opens it in the middle. Back to scene. Mrs. Mason. Times are different now. When I was married, every well-brought-up girl knew something about cooking. Jane suddenly explodes, slams down the book in her hand. Mrs. Mason, turning. Why, Jane, what is it? I can't cook. I can't keep house. I don't know how to bring up a baby. Johnny. Now, Jane, please. He starts towards the two women. Mrs. Mason. I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. Jane, tense with rage. Oh, yes, you do. You've resented me from the first moment you saw me. You resented me because you wanted Johnny to marry Eunice Doolittle. My dear, I never said anything like that. You've hinted at it often enough. I've done nothing of the sort, but they were engaged. Johnny. Mother, I was never engaged to Eunice Doolittle. Not what you'd call engaged, perhaps. And even if I were, you shouldn't keep mentioning it to Jane all the time. I can't understand why she's so touchy about it. Touchy? That's why you hate me. Jane, will you please? No, let her go on. She can say anything she likes. I know my place here. I'm only a guest, an unwelcome guest. For crying out loud, what's the matter with you two? Nothing's the matter with me. It's her house. Please, Mother, it's not my house. Now, Jane, please. I do the best I can to help. Now, listen. I'm the stranger around here. Everything I say is wrong. Everything I do is wrong. Jane, will you? Just because I happened to mention that John and Eunice Doolittle. Now, stop it. Both of you. Mrs. Mason gives him a startled look, utters an anguished sob, and exits rapidly, slamming the door violently behind her. Two shot, Johnny and Jane. Johnny turning miserably to Jane. There, you see what you made me say to Mother? You said it to me too. Don't I count? Of course you count, darling. Only Mother's an old lady. She won't be with us for very long. Why can't you get along with her? Why can't she get along with me? Because she hates me. You don't know how it is. You're at the office all day, between taking care of the baby and the house and cooking and listening to her criticize everything I do. I can't stand it anymore. Camera pans with her to bedroom door. You can only spit out so many seeds. She exits into her bedroom with a terrific slam of the door. Interior living room, close shot, Johnny. He stands a moment, defeated and miserable. Then the flame of revolt registers in his face. He looks down at the floor and sees the baby's white cat where he had previously dropped it. He kicks the cat viciously across the room. Camera pans with him to the chair where his hat and overcoat are. He picks them up, goes to the front door, and slams out. Camera holds a minute on the empty room, then close shot at door to Jane's bedroom. Jane comes out, looks around for Johnny. Camera panning with her, then calls out in alarm, Johnny, Johnny. She looks towards the chair in hall where her wrap and Johnny's overcoat had been. Jane's wrap is there, but Johnny's overcoat is gone. She quickly grabs her wrap and flies to the outer door, calling as she opens it and runs out. Johnny! Top of stairway, overhead shot. Shooting down over stairway and over Jane's head. Down a flight we see Johnny, going down. Jane enters quickly, carrying wrap. Johnny! Johnny stops, turns, and looks up. What? Shooting up stairway, as Jane comes galloping down, talking as she does. Where are you going? Johnny turns away as she catches up with him and stops one step above him. Oh, I don't know. Anywhere to get away from that wrangling. Wait a minute. She runs down the steps and joins him. Don't you want me to go with you? Well, can't you understand a man wants to be alone once in a while? I'm sorry, Johnny. Really, I am. You don't have to apologize. Jane, hurt at his failure to respond, but really trying to help. Would you rather I didn't come with you? He doesn't answer. Jane continues pleasantly, with a sad little smile. All right, Johnny. I don't mind. You go along and have a good time. She turns and goes up a step. Johnny, less than half-hearted. Oh, come on along if you want to. You're sure you don't mind? Certainly I don't mind. Jane advances and takes his arm. We'll have a wonderful time. You just wait and see. Dissolve 2. Interior cafe long shot. The place is crowded. Gaiety reigns. The tiny dance floor is packed with hilarious couples. Close shot at table, Jane and Johnny. There's an open bottle of wine on the table, and before each a glass of wine. Before each of them also a plate containing a sandwich which has not been touched. Jane and Johnny are not looking at each other, but are pretending to be interested in the scene about them. Johnny finally meets Jane's eyes. Oh, Johnny, what's happened to us? I don't know. Maybe I pulled a dirty trick on you when I took that cinder out of your eye up in Boston. What do you mean? I mean, maybe the whole thing's been a mistake. What whole thing? Our marriage. Oh, Johnny. Words pouring out of him now. I've gotten into debt, I've gotten nowhere at the office, and I've made a household drudge out of you, just as Mother said. Jane, it hasn't worked out. It just hasn't worked out. But we've never had any real trouble. Maybe a few silly little things that everybody has to meet when they get married. Maybe we shouldn't have had the baby. Oh, Johnny, you can't be sorry about the baby. I'm crazy about him and about you too. I'd die for either of you. Jane, everybody that passes this table stops and looks at you. It's because you're young and so beautiful, your whole life ahead of you. Ahead of us. No, not when you're dragged down by a guy who just can't make the grade. No, I'm not going to hold you to that kind of contract. Jane leans back in her chair. She tries desperately to seem matter-of-fact. Well, you ought to know all about contracts. She shrugs and fights to keep her voice steady. Well, anyway, I suppose this is what you'd call starting the new year right. Johnny is too miserable to say anything. Jane tries to make her smile breezy and gay. She reaches for her glass of wine. At least we finally got something we can celebrate. She lifts her glass and her voice breaks. Well, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Johnny clicks glasses with her. Jane sips the wine and then bends her head forward to hide her face from him for an instant. He looks helplessly across the table and is about to say something when she lifts her head. Her eyes are wet, but she flashes him a dazzling smile. Want to dance, darling? They rise and start towards the dance floor. Long shot, Jane and Johnny threading their way through the crowd toward dance floor. Close moving shot, Johnny and Jane dancing. They dance silently. A thunderous roll of drums comes into the shot, and all the dancers stop to turn towards the musicians. Close shot, orchestra stand. The trap drummer plays a rolling of drums to usher in the new year. Full shot, cafe. A crescendo of sounds, whistles, and other noise-making devices from the outside blend with the increasing shouts, yells of Happy New Year within the cafe. The lights go out. A whirling crystal ball from the ceiling of the cafe starts to turn. Various colored flashlights play against it and cross each other, creating weird lighting effects. From above, a bunch of colored balloons tumble down. Everybody in the near dark starts exchanging New Year's kisses. Close shot, Johnny and Jane in the crowd. They look off at all the other revelers exchanging kisses. Johnny and Jane seem to be the only ones who aren't kissing. They look at each other embarrassed, and Jane, as always, takes the initiative, looks into his eyes, and then kisses him tenderly. Johnny starts to put his arms around her, but doesn't. The orchestra off-scene strikes up Auld Lang Syne. The people sing. Johnny and Jane, holding hands, start to sing with frantic efforts at gaiety that they are trying to wring from their leaden hearts. After the first 4 lines, Jane can no longer control her emotions, and she turns and starts away to keep from bursting into tears. The singing continues. I think I'll go phone the house and wish the baby a Happy New Year. Johnny takes a step to follow her. Jane, But Jane has disappeared in the crowd. Close moving shot in front of Jane. Her face in camera. Auld Lang Syne still continuing. Jane fights her way quickly through the crowd, tears streaming from her eyes. 100 balloons come from the ceiling. Bibulous gents stretch arms out to stop her, but she proceeds, fighting her way up towards a telephone booth. People call to her as she presses through, but Jane pays no attention. One woman, seeing the tears in Jane's eyes, calls, "Crying Jag." A happy drunk brushes past her. "Happy New Year, Blondie." A man calls from a table as she passes. "Hey, sister, wait a minute." Another man, "Hurry back, honey." One of the balloons floats in front of Jane's face. A man's hand with a cigar comes in and pops the balloon. Serpentine and long paper whistles unfold in front of her face. Medium shot, Johnny and Jane's table. Johnny edges his way past people and sits down at the table, leaden-hearted and miserable. At an adjoining table, a party is in progress, singing and chattering and having a particularly good noisy time. A blonde at this table looks over and sees Johnny. She moves her chair an inch backward, tilts it so her face is nearly in Johnny's. "Hey, lonely heart, what's the matter?" Johnny makes a feeble attempt to call back in a croaking voice, "Happy New Year." The blonde maneuvers herself a little nearer, crooks her arm through Johnny's. "All alone? Come over and join our party." "Happy New Year." "Why are you so mad? Don't you feel good?" "I feel fine." "Come on, handsome, we got champagne." She starts pulling at Johnny's arm and turns to her companions. "Look what I found, a poor little lamb lost in the storm, alone and neglected." A chorus of hilarious greetings from the people at the table, with invitations to join them and have a drink. Johnny is resisting the efforts to make him take a seat at their table when Jane rushes up, wild-eyed, panicky. Close shot as Jane grabs hold of Johnny. "Johnny, come quick, the baby." Johnny rises, alarmed. "Something's the matter with the baby." They rush out, frantic, and we dissolve to exterior apartment house, night. Open on close-up the word ambulance. Camera pulls back, and we see now that printed above the word ambulance is printed also St. Francis Hospital. The ambulance is lined up at the curb. Out of the sounds of the New Year's Eve revelry, back of this comes the starting of an ambulance siren. Camera pulls back farther as the ambulance pulls away from the curb, and with the noise of the siren increasing, starts away. At the same time the ambulance starts away, we see a taxi pull in to take the place of the departing ambulance. As it comes to a stop with a grinding of brakes, from it emerges Johnny and Jane. Fear-stricken, they look after the departing ambulance, then rush over to Dr. Healy and Mrs. Mason, who stand at the curb. Dr. Healy carries his satchel. Close shot, the group, Johnny, Jane, Mrs. Mason, and the doctor. Jane to Mrs. Mason, frantically looking back from the ambulance. "Mother, the baby, was that—" Johnny to the doctor. "Dr. Healy, what is it?" Jane's face is agonized. Dr. Healy hesitates, looks from her to Johnny, hating what he has to tell them. "Pneumonia." Jane, a moan of anguish. "Oh!" Over the stricken face of Jane and Johnny, we hear sounds of laughter and yelling and cries of Happy New Year. Fade out. Fade in. Exterior, hospital, a dark, murky day, rain, close-up, plaque, with the words, St. Francis Hospital. Dissolve to interior, corridor, close shot, lettering on door. Camera pulls back and we see Johnny pacing up and down in front of the door. He too wears his evening clothes of the night before. The door opens and Dr. Healy comes out. Johnny comes quickly up to him. "Dr. Healy!" "Come into the office a minute." He takes Johnny's arms and leads him into an office adjoining the laboratory. Interior laboratory office, medium shot. Dr. Healy enters with Johnny. Sit down, my boy. He indicates a chair by the desk. Johnny sits down. Dr. Healy goes to the desk but doesn't sit. Two shot, Johnny and Dr. Healy. Dr. Healy, you'd better get your wife. Johnny, now, doctor, if it's bad news, I don't want her to know about it. She just couldn't stand it. But you can tell me, doctor. Dr. Healy speaks with deep regret. Your baby has type 9 pneumococcus with a streptococcus complication. And I'm sorry to say that the congestion is increasing. Now there's a serum, a new one. It's worked out in some cases. Without it, we don't stand a chance. With it, well, perhaps we have a ghost of a chance. We must get some of that serum as soon as possible. Every hour counts. I don't know whether we can locate any of it in the city or not. I'm going to check up on that right away. Johnny gets to his feet and grabs the doctor by the arm. Doctor, please don't tell my wife. I won't. He picks up the phone and speaks into it. Give me the city health department. Dissolve to a series of montage shots. Interior, New York City Health Department laboratory, rainy, dark day. The lights are lighted. A young pharmacist in white jacket is talking over telephone. All the type 9 serum has been sent to Salt Lake. Why don't you try Johns Hopkins in Baltimore? Dissolve to Interior Laboratory, Indianapolis. A woman in laboratory smock talking over phone. Sorry, we shipped all we had for the epidemic in Salt Lake City. Dissolve to Interior Section, Salt Lake Hospital. Another man over phone. Yes, the epidemic is under control here in Salt Lake, and we can spare 620 cc vials, but how are you going to get it out of here in this storm? Dissolve to, dissolve in, exterior, Judge Doolittle's house, close shot at door, midnight. Johnny is ringing the doorbell and banging on the knocker at the same time. Interior, Judge Doolittle's house, medium shot at door. Simon, the butler, comes to the door and opens it a little to peer out at the midnight intruder. There is a blast of wind and rain as the door is shoved open and Johnny forces his way into the hall. He is rain-drenched, disheveled, and almost hysterical with panic. Johnny, breathless, panting. I've got to see Judge Doolittle right away. Simon, at this hour of the morning? You'll have to wake him up. Oh, I couldn't do that. You've got to. He knows me. I work for him. I've got to see him. I'm sorry, but Judge Doolittle would never allow me to. Johnny suddenly shoves the butler violently to one side and starts up the stairs on the run. Long shot, stairs. As Johnny runs up towards the sleeping quarters above. Simon, alarmed and indignant. Stay there. Wait, you mustn't do that. Where are you going? Simon starts up after Johnny. Interior, Judge Doolittle's bedroom. Shooting past bed in foreground, full shot. The room is dark. Judge Doolittle is asleep in the four-posted bed. Through the partly open transom, we see the light go on in the hall and hear the commotion made by Johnny, who is trying to locate Judge Doolittle's room. He has opened a door and we hear him slam it closed. Simon's voice. You mustn't do this. This is outrageous. The door in the background is flung open and Johnny appears. The light from the hallway helps him find the hall switch in the room and he pushes it. The room lights up. Johnny starts towards the bed. The figure of the frightened butler appears in the open doorway in the background. Close shot at bed. The judge is a heavy sleeper and the turning on of the lights hasn't awakened him. Johnny comes into the shot. In the background, Simon waits, open-mouthed. Johnny. Judge Doolittle. Doolittle stirs but doesn't waken. Johnny repeats, louder. Judge Doolittle. He bends down and shakes the sleeping man. Come on, wake up. Wake up. Close shot, Judge Doolittle. He awakes and peers owlishly upward, squinting through one eye. Johnny's voice. Judge, I'm sorry to wake you like this. Close shot at bed. Doolittle throws the blanket off and is revealed in pajamas. He swings over and sits on the edge of the bed, reaches for his glasses on the night table, puts them on and glares up at Johnny, anger creeping through his drowsiness. What is this? I've got to talk to you right now. Are you drunk? My kid's in the hospital. He's got pneumonia. Doolittle cups his hand to his ear, trying to hear, looks around for his acousticon. You must be drunk waking me up in the middle of the night like this. It's outrageous. Never heard of such a thing. Johnny realizes Doolittle isn't hearing him. He looks around, spots the Judge acousticon on the night table, and reaches for it. Judge Doolittle. Mason, if this is your way of celebrating the new year... Johnny shoves the acousticon into Doolittle's hand. Put it on. Doolittle puts it on, outraged. Glaring, he says, Now, Mason, you listen to me. Johnny shouts, No, you listen to me. When you asked me to take a cut, I took it, but I shouldn't have, because that's the reason the baby has to sleep in the dining room and... Judge Doolittle, beginning to doubt Johnny's sanity. What are you talking about? Johnny, my baby's in the hospital, dying of pneumonia. Judge Doolittle motions with acousticon. What? Johnny shouts, Dying. Dying. Can't you understand that? Judge Doolittle. Dying? Yes, my baby. Your baby? Well, his rage melts. Why didn't you get in touch with me sooner? I'm terribly sorry. He gets out of bed and puts on his robe. Johnny, I don't need sympathy. I need serum. There isn't any in New York, and there's none anywhere near here, and they finally located some in Salt Lake City, and that's 2,000 miles away, and every hour counts. He is almost sobbing the words out now. Judge Doolittle, with utmost sympathy. Now, Mason, be calm. I can't be calm. I'll never be calm till I get the serum, and the only way to get it here is to fly it. Certainly, fly it, of course. But there's a terrific storm over Utah. All planes are grounded. If there's just one thing we could do... Judge Doolittle grabs hold of Johnny's arms. Now, Mason, get a hold of yourself. I know how you feel, but get hold of yourself. Suppose the planes aren't grounded. Why can't you put it on one of the fast trains? But we can't. I told you, hours count. Every minute counts. It'd be too late. We need a plane from Salt Lake, and we've got one, but the pilot wants $5,000 to fly it to New York. And, Judge, I didn't have anyone else to turn to. Doolittle interrupts him with a loud shout. Simon! Well, what are you standing there for? The butler comes into the scene. My checkbook! Get me my checkbook! Camera angle widens as Simon scurries to secretary. And get me a pen, quick, one that will write, and find out where the nearest telegraph office is. Simon scurries out of the room. Judge Doolittle... He goes to Johnny, whose head is buried in his hands, patting Johnny on the shoulder. You should have gotten in touch with me sooner, but don't worry about that serum. We'll have it here and in plenty of time, too. As Johnny looks up at Judge Doolittle pitifully and gratefully, with Doolittle's hand still on his shoulder, we hold a minute, then dissolve to exterior, Salt Lake City Airport, miniature, night, blizzard, close shot, windsock from elevation. The sock flops crazily in the wind. Camera moves past it and down, revealing a stretch of snowy ground with building of airport office below. The circular beacon of the landing field is dimly visible through the storm. As camera moves down, we come over the airport office structure, which has large lettering covering the roof area. The lettering is partially obliterated by windswept snow, but as camera moves closer, we can make it out. Salt Lake City. Dissolve to interior, Salt Lake City Airport. Night manager's office. Night. Blizzard, close shot, Hatton at phone. Hatton? Yeah, Mr. Mason. The serum's here and the money's here too, and I could certainly use the dough. But the weather's gotten so bad it's impossible to take off. Listens a minute. What can I do? Camera moves back to take in Collins, Conway, and a couple of others standing by listening. Hatton turns an eloquent look of despair on them as he listens. I know how you feel. I'm married myself and I've got a couple of kids. But I gotta think of them too. My wife won't let me. She says if I go, she won't be here when I get back. If I get back. He puts his hand over the receiver and remarks to the group around him, plaintively, "What do you do with a guy like that?" Conway, "Let me talk to him." He takes the phone from Hatton's hands and speaks into it, belligerently. "Now listen you, what do you think this is, a suicide club? You can't expect anybody in his right mind to fly a plane on a night like this, especially an old crate with whiskers. Why don't you—" He listens a moment, and we see his truculence gradually melting. "Sure, that's tough. We'd certainly like to help you. Ain't there no other place you could get some of the stuff? Maybe in a few hours when the weather clears up." He listens a moment. His expression changes. He puts his hand over the receiver and turns to the group around him in an odd voice. "Gee, the guy's crying." Picks up the receiver. "Now wait a minute, buddy. Take it easy. Suppose hold the wire." He puts his hand over receiver and turns to the group behind him, helplessly. He just won't take no for an answer. Hesitates, then speaks to Hatton. "Jim, could I borrow your plane?" Hatton, "Are you nuts?" Conway, "You know how it is. You've got kids of your own. Suppose you was in his place." "I can't let you have my plane. I've got no insurance on it. I couldn't get any." Conway, in phone, "Hold it a minute. Keep your shirt on." To Hatton, "I'll give you half the money if you'll loan me the crate." "Suppose you crack it up. Then you can keep the whole 5. I won't need it." "I think you're crazy, but all right, if you want to." Conway, speaking into phone, "Okay, buddy, relax." Dissolve to Interior Airport Office, Salt Lake City, dawn, blizzard. Standing at the frost-covered window, Hatton, Collins, and a couple of others. Collins, "Do you think he'll ever get off the ground with all that gas?" Hatton, "Well, I did, going to Honolulu." Hatton rubs off some of the frost to clear space on the pane, and they peer through at the field. Through the blizzard, with the beacon lights circling the field, we dimly make out Conway's plane. It taxis across the field and takes off in the storm. The men listen to the dying sound of the plane's motors. Hatton shrugs and turns to Collins. "I can't say I like that kind of money, but it looks like I'll be in $5,000 before morning." Dissolve to Interior Catholic Hospital corridor, close shot at door to baby's room. The corridor is quite dark, except for such light as may come in from laboratory or perhaps one open door somewhere in corridor. Dr. Healy comes out of the baby's room, sees Jane coming towards him as he closes the door. He glances down hall and sees in the background the dim figure of a man wheeling something towards the baby's room. He turns quickly to Jane, maneuvering so she cannot see what is coming down the corridor. Jane looks imploringly at the doctor's face. Dr. Healy, "He's all right. He's holding his own nicely." "May I go in and see him?" "I don't think you'd better, not just now." "Why, doctor? Why don't you want me to see him?" "Now, don't worry. It's just that." "Then why don't you want me to see him?" She starts to brush past the doctor forcibly. When she stops, seeing that the man with the wheelbarrow who has come up behind the doctor has opened the door of the baby's room. As he does, a light from the baby's room reveals the cylinder of oxygen which he has been wheeling. Close shot, cylinder. The light from the falling room on the cylinder in such a manner as to bring out vividly the word oxygen printed on it. Two shot, Dr. Healy and Jane. The shock of seeing the oxygen is the trigger that unloosens the pent-up emotion in Jane. "You're lying to me, doctor. The baby's worse. That's why you ordered the oxygen." She reaches for the doorknob and the doctor stops her, grabbing hold of her. Mrs. Mason comes into the scene from the waiting room. The doctor and Mrs. Mason try to soothe Jane, and her hysteria mounts. The doctor takes hold of one of Jane's arms and Mrs. Mason the other. Mrs. Mason, "Jane, dear, Jane, please." Dr. Healy, "The oxygen's only to help him till the serum gets here." Jane, hysterically, "You're lying to me." Camera trucks with them as they lead her forcibly away from the baby's room towards the waiting room. Dr. Healy, "I want you to lie down and rest. I'll give you something to make you sleep. Will you do that for me?" Jane, hysterically, "Oh, Dr. Healy, I couldn't. Please don't make me." They stop at the entrance of the waiting room. Jane takes hold of herself and with a powerful effort controls her hysteria. "I'm sorry, doctor. I'm all right now. When can I see him?" "In a little while." He exits back to baby's room. Camera pans with Jane as she goes to the window seat, sinks to the floor, and looks out at the beating rain of the night. Mrs. Mason comes into the shot and looks pityingly down at the wretched, forlorn figure. Jane, after a second or two, "If my baby dies, I want to die too." Mrs. Mason, sympathetically, "I know, dear, I know, but you mustn't feel that way. You mustn't let John know you feel that way. He loves the baby too, almost as much as he loves you." Jane, "Poor Johnny, he'll be so lonely if the baby—" She can't bring herself to say dies. Mrs. Mason, "He'll have you, Jane, and you'll have him." Jane makes no comment. Mrs. Mason continues, "And you can't be lonely, either of you, as long as you have each other. Do you know when you're really lonely? It's when you have no one to share things with, not even a loss." She can't go further in her revelation. Jane turns slowly, seeing her mother-in-law for the first time. "Oh, Mother, you're lonely, aren't you?" Mrs. Mason turns away. There's a silence. Jane goes to her sympathetically, almost forgetting her own grief for a moment. "Mrs. Mason, I wasn't always a bitter old woman. I wasn't always a pest and a nuisance." She breaks. "Not when I had someone to share things with." Jane takes her into her arms, and now Jane comforts her, whose front breaks and who sobs against Jane. Mrs. Mason, "And now the baby. Oh, my baby's baby." Jane, the tears rolling down her cheeks. "Oh, Mother, Mother." And on a tableau of Jane devotedly and heartbrokenly comforting her old mother-in-law, whose head is on Jane's shoulder, Jane's arm around her, we fade out. Fade in. Long shot, plane, blizzard, dawn. The plane is making its way over a vista of snow-capped mountain peaks. Medium shot, plane. The storm seems to be increasing in violence, causing the ship to roll from side to side. Interior, cockpit of plane, close shot. Conway, silent. He is worried, reaches for the radio transmitter and yells into the mouthpiece. His voice cannot be heard over the roar of the motor and the howling wind. Conway shakes his head, getting over that he gets no response. His radio is evidently out of commission. He takes off the headset, glances at the instrument board. Interior, cockpit of plane, instrument board, close-up of altimeter. Needle registers 13,500 feet. Back to close-up, Conway. He looks at serum package, takes off his glove, and feels the package to make sure it hasn't frozen. Insert serum package. It is marked Rush, avoid freezing. Conway's hand feels the package. Close-up, Conway. Satisfied that the serum is okay, he starts to write on a pad that is strapped to his leg between knee and thigh. Insert radio log. Conway writes, 6:40 a.m., radio dead, fighting for altitude, terrific downdraft, force, a sudden lurch of the plane snaps the lead in the pencil. Close-up, Conway, as he grabs the quivering joystick, fights vainly to control the plane. Medium shot, plane, starts to lose altitude. Insert altimeter, needle going down. Long shot, plane in long downdraft. A thrilling shot of the plane going down. Close-up, Conway, fighting joystick, he looks over side of plane. Point of view shot. Diving at rugged snow-covered cliffs, the ground appearing to come closer and closer. Close-up, Conway, struggling to control the plane. The snow and mist getting heavier. Medium shot, plane. The wheels touch the ground, and for an instant it looks as if it were all over. With the roar of the motor, the plane zooms up. Long shot, plane. It fails to gain altitude and continues down and down until it is completely lost in the swirling snow and mist. Hold on snow-filled screen a moment. Dissolve to montage sequence. Interior airfield radio station, Denver, stormy. Day. Close shot operator. Rain is beating against the window behind him. He is talking into his instrument. Denver calling commercial NC24. Come in, Conway. Come in. Waits. No answer comes. He speaks again with increasing anxiety. Can't you read me, Conway? Can't you read me? Come in, Conway. Still no answer. Turns dial, shakes his head in despair, in dead, hopeless voice. Denver calling Newark. Do you read me, Newark? Wipe. Interior, Newark Airport radio room, early morning. Close shot. Chief radio operator, at his instrument board. Camera draws back to reveal behind the Newark chief operator, the chief of operators at Newark Airport, superintendent, the assistant radio operator, Judge Doolittle, and Johnny. The two latter are listening with suppressed excitement. Denver operator's voice, coming from instrument. Still can't contact Conway. Storm increasing over the Rockies. Denver. Close up, Johnny. He registers apprehension as he listens. Close up, Newark superintendent. Worried, he unfolds his arms. Quietly, in flat voice, controlling his fears, he says, Send out an emergency to all stations. Stand by to contact Conway. Wipe. North Platte radio station, close-up operator. North Platte operator. North Platte, Nebraska, calling Conway, commercial NC24. Do you read me? Wipe. Omaha radio station, close-up operator. Conway, NC24, this is Omaha. Do you read me, Conway? Wipe. Chicago radio station, close-up operator. Chicago, calling commercial NC24. Conway, can you read me? Can't you answer, Conway? Wipe. Interior Ranger Station, day. One ranger is in uniform and is at the telephone. Another is gazing out a window in background, against which snow is striking. The latter is peering through binoculars. A pair of dripping skis stands against the walls behind the man at the phone. Ranger, into phone, shakes his head. No, we haven't seen or heard a play all day. Sorry, but there's no use sending search parties out in this blizzard. Wipe. Insert newspaper headline, reading, All hope gone for Mercy Plain. Dissolve to Interior Hospital, baby's room, dark, day. The rain has stopped, but it is a dark, dreary day, and the lights of the hospital are turned on. A nurse sits by the bedside. Open on close shot of the baby in his small bed covered with the oxygen tent. He breathes with great difficulty. Camera pans around to show Dr. Healy crossing the room with his stethoscope in his hand, making his way to the bed. Camera follows Dr. Healy until he passes in front of Jane, then holds on Jane, and we see her looking fixedly at the small bed, stark pain in her eyes. Sister Madeline stands beside her. Big head close-up, Dr. Healy, the earphones over his ears. As he listens gravely to the irregular heartbeats of the baby, and we hear them faintly on the soundtrack. Close shot, Jane. Her hand goes to her breast in a mute gesture of agony as she watches. In a low voice, she gives expression to the one thought that has been racking through her head for hours. Oh, if there was something I could do, if there was just something. Sister Madeline moves closer, puts her head gently on Jane's shoulder. There is. Come with me. She takes Jane's arm. Camera trucks with them as they leave the room and start down the corridor together. Dissolve to close shot at chapel doors. Sister Madeline opens the doors. Jane looks in and sees the chapel. Jane turns to Sister Madeline. Sister Madeline, I'm not Catholic. Sister Madeline shakes her head. That doesn't matter. Jane steps into the chapel. Sister Madeline softly closes the chapel doors behind her. Camera trucks in front of Jane as she walks down towards the altar. Close shot, section of chapel. Taking in the altar, the lit candles, the figure of Jesus, Jane comes into shot and looks uncertainly about. She studies the figure of Jesus a moment in silence. She hesitates, then sinks to her knees before the figure, and with her head bowed, mutters to herself, shaking her head. She lifts her face to the figure. Close shot, Jane. Shooting down from above and behind the silhouetted figure of Jesus, only Jane's face, lighted by the candlelight. Jane, stumbling to find the right words. You know how much he means to Johnny and me. We've only had him such a little while. Oh God, dear, dear God, please. We do want to see him grow up and be a man. Please help our little baby. We love him so. He's so small and helpless. He can't do anything for himself, and we can't seem to do anything for him. She clasps her hands and speaks imploringly. Please, please, please. Dissolve to plain, long shot. Starting with shot only of gray fog and clouds and sound of roaring plane motor. Then plane emerges from behind clouds into scene. Close up, Conway, silent, shooting up through cockpit. He is worried, reaches for a map, and with a flashlight tries to find something he can recognize on the map. Insert map, with Conway's flashlight shining on it. Back to Conway. He is frantic, realizing he is lost. He puts the map and the flashlight away and looks over side of plane to see if there's a hole in the clouds that he might get through. Then, almost instinctively, nervously reaches for a cigarette. Suddenly, a few drops of oil spatter the windshield of the plane. He peers over the side, alarmed, and oil sprays on his goggles. As he pushes his goggles back and wipes his face, plane, long shot, with a cloud of smoke pouring out behind. The plane is catching fire. Interior, cockpit, Conway. Frantically pulls out his flashlight, prepares to bail out, picks up the box of serum and sticks it under his jacket, and jumps. Long shot, plane. Parachute and plane falling. The plane now spurting flame. The parachute disappears into the fog. Dissolve to interior, doctor's office and hospital, night, fog. Dr. Healy, showing the signs of strain and weariness, stands in the office drinking from a coffee cup. A uniformed nurse stands before him. Nurse, shall I order another tank of oxygen, doctor? Dr. Healy shrugs in despair. If the serum isn't here in a couple of hours. He turns towards the door as he hears sounds of footsteps in the corridor. Reverse shot shooting through open doorway, from the doctor's angle. The defeated figure of Johnny passes the doorway. His coat collar is turned up around his ears. Interior waiting room, close shot, Jane. Fog. Lying stretched out with pillows under her head on the window seat. She tosses her head slowly and restlessly. We hold on her long enough to allow for Johnny's walk down the hall. Interior waiting room, longer shot. Johnny enters. Jane turns, sees him. Hello, Johnny. Hello, Jane. He crosses over and kneels beside her. Jane, big head close-up, looking at Johnny. Johnny, big close-up, looking at Jane. Close two-shot. Johnny gently strokes her hair. He speaks with a strange, newfound serenity. We'll always be together, Jane, no matter what happens, like this, always. He continues stroking her hair, and we hold on this a moment, then slowly dissolve. Exterior field, close shot. The parachute tangled up in the lower branches of a tree. Night, fog. Camera pans down the tattered chute to the body of Conway, limply sprawled out on the wet ground. We hold for a moment. Camera moves up to a closer shot. We hold a moment on his motionless figure, then we see the body stir. Close up, Conway. His face is scratched and filthy. He opens his eyes, lifts himself up with a grimace of pain. He stares for a moment at his left foot, then starts to disengage the harness of the chute. He remembers something and sticks his right hand frantically on the inside of his coat. His hand comes out with the package of serum. It is safe. He manages a grin through his pain and puts it back inside his coat. He looks around, tries to get to his feet, and realizes he can't walk. His leg is broken. Camera trucks with him as he starts to crawl along the muddy field through the fog. Long shot, Conway, crawling along the field. As his body is lost in the fog, we dissolve to long shot, farmhouse, fog. The farmhouse stands alone. Conway's figure is dimly seen on his knees, knocking at the door. From over the shoulder, the sound of a dog barking. A light goes on in an upstairs window. Exterior farmhouse, close shot at door, night, fog. Conway on his knees before the door, pounding on it with his knuckles. From over the shoulder, the sound of the dog barking. The door opens and a sleepy, bewildered farmer with an overcoat over his full-length underwear, in which he has undoubtedly been sleeping, is seen. Behind him, carrying a kerosene lamp, is the farmer's wife, with a shabby robe over her nightgown. Farmer: Who are you? What do you want? Conway: I'm hurt. Will you help me? Farmer's wife: Mercy sakes alive. Farmer and his wife go to Conway, half lift him up and drag him over the threshold. Interior, farmhouse, medium shot. Farmer and his wife helping Conway into the room. They stare, frightened and bewildered at the strange figure they have let in out of the night. Farmer: What is it? What's happened? Conway: Never mind that. What place is this? Liberty Corners. Where's that? 35 miles from New York. Suddenly Conway sways and his eyes close. He falls to the floor in a dead faint. Farmer's wife: Well, for mercy's sakes alive. The farmer drops to his knees beside Conway. He turns the unconscious form over and looks down into Conway's face. Suddenly, the farmer catches sight of the package of serum which is protruding from the open front of Conway's flying suit. The farmer pulls the package out and stares at it. He reads the label. St. Francis Hospital, New York City, Rush. The significance of the package dawns on him. He rises and hurries to the telephone. The phone is an old-fashioned one, used only in rural districts. The farmer turns the handle and the bell rings, the signal for the operator. He then takes down the receiver and speaks. Hello, operator. I want the St. Francis Hospital, New York City. He glances towards the weird-looking body of Conway, turns back to the phone, and reverses the charges. Insert serum package. The wrapping being torn off and the box opened, exposing the vials of serum. Dissolve to hospital corridor. Insert signal board. The name, Dr. Healy, flashing on and off. Dissolve to close-up nurse's hand, holding the baby's wrist, taking his pulse. Dissolve to close-up hypodermic needle being filled with fluid. Dissolve to interior hospital corridor outside baby's room. The door bursts open and Johnny comes out, turns to look back into the baby's room for a moment, then starts off down the long corridor at a run. He reaches the door to the waiting room and throws it open. Interior hospital, waiting room, close shot. Jane is sitting near the window, asleep, worn out with worry and strain. She hears Johnny coming in and wakes up with a start. Jane looks at Johnny, a silent question in her eyes. Johnny, tenderly and joyfully, says, "Happy New Year, darling." Jane only stares at him. Then the significance of the words strikes her. She goes into his arms. Happy New Year, Happy New Year. Over her hysterical laughter, dissolve to interior cafe, close shot at bar, day. Dr. Healy, Judge Doolittle, Ed Conway, the pilot who brought the serum. Conway's left leg is stiff and he leans on a cane. Camera picks up our trio as the three lift their glasses up and slug down their drinks, then set the empty glasses down on the bar. Judge Doolittle, smacking his lips, Well, gentlemen, I guess 4's about enough on a business day. Conway: That's all very well, Joe, but isn't it about time you bought one? Judge Doolittle flips open his coat. What's that? Conway speaks into mouthpiece. Conway calling Doolittle. Dissolve 2. Exterior, Doolittle's suite of offices, close up, door. We read first only the old firm name of Doolittle, Messerschmitt, Doolittle, Hutch. Camera pans down to close up the remainder of firm name, which now reads Carter and Mason. Johnny's voice: And there are certain things, gentlemen, that I want distinctly understood. Cut to interior, Doolittle's office. Camera draws back to reveal Johnny pacing before the two brothers. He is orating great guns. At his desk, Doolittle is seated, and standing behind him are several other members of the staff, which include the hitherto nebulous Messerschmitt, Hutch, and the other Doolittle. They are all watching and listening to Johnny with the greatest respect and attention. It is obvious that Johnny is now the fair-haired boy of the firm. Johnny: Now I call this meeting of all the partners in order to make my position clear once and for all, that before I accept your offer of partnership in the firm of intercut close-ups of each member of the firm as Johnny calls their names, Doolittle, Messerschmitt, Doolittle, Hutch, and Carter, you must know that I consider the methods of this firm at the present time old-fashioned, self-satisfied, high-handed, and thoroughly inefficient. Carter, who has been leaning against the wall, straightens up and addresses Doolittle. It seems to me, Judge Doolittle sharply says, quiet. Johnny: And I demand that they be changed, effective immediately. There is a loud knock on the door. Judge Doolittle frowns and calls out, Come in. Close shot at door. It opens and John Horace Mason II walks in on his own power. An instant later, Jane and Mrs. Mason come in, bursting with news. Jane: Excuse me, I hope we haven't interrupted anything important. Johnny comes into the scene, frowning. Johnny: Now, Jane. Johnny: I know Judge Doolittle won't mind. Camera angle widens as Judge Doolittle and the others come into the scene. Jane: We just couldn't wait. Mrs. Mason: We had to rush down the minute it happened. What happened? The baby can talk. She drops down on her knees by the baby and takes hold of his shoulders. Jane, to the baby: They don't believe us. Come on, darling, we'll prove it to them. The men in the office crowd around her. Close up, Johnny, beaming with pride. Close shot, the faces of the men behind Johnny. They wait expectantly. Jane's voice: Show them, darling. Don't be afraid. Speak up. Say daddy. Say daddy. Please, darling, say daddy. Close up, baby, looking coyly up at the group around him. He says nothing. Close up, Johnny, pleadingly. Say daddy. Daddy. Close up, baby, just looking. Close up, Judge Doolittle. Say daddy. Say daddy. Close up, baby and Jane. Jane: Come on, Johnny. Say daddy. Say daddy. Baby: Mama. Close up, Doolittle brothers, as they flip back their coats to hear better. Doolittle brothers, together. What? Fade out. The end.